What character would realistically learn magic in Marvel? This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 51 Death of the Painter. Geralt began to look for clues in the house. He had carefully examined Cronin's body. The murderer was experienced and clean. The fatal wound was in the neck. The throat was cut with a dagger from behind, then bled, dragged to the living room, and the internal organs were removed. He described it in his mind with a detached mentality, silently guessing the identity of the murderer. If he wanted to do this, he must be bold and careful, and he may have done it many times before. At the same time, killing people is fine, but the scene was deliberately arranged so horrifyingly. Was it to warn someone? The Witcher came to Cronin's study and began to look through Cronin's letters. Most of them were just ordinary correspondence, such as letters to tax collectors, the college he attended, or letters to his family. There was nothing special, only 3 letters were worth mentioning. The first letter was unsigned, and this letter was written in blood. "We know exactly what you want to do, Cronin. You'd better stop. Then, for the sake of your family, maybe we will let you go. But if you persist, then I'm afraid that Mrs. Gregory will only see the cold body of her son. You'd better warn your companions, boy. You must stop immediately." Geralt silently put the letter into his inner pocket, and began to read the second letter. This letter was very short. It was sent by a man named K, with the scent of lysanthes. "Oh my God, Cronin, you must leave immediately. I beg you. Stop what you are doing. It's too dangerous. They won't sit idly by and watch you continue." The third letter was written by Cronin himself. He didn't send it out, and he didn't even write who it was sent to. The young man's handwriting was neat and elegant, but the content was not so. "Fuck you. Threaten me. You can use violence to deal with me, but you can never deal with the facts. Something is bound to happen, just like you tried to kill me. If you can do it, just do it. I will not be afraid of you. I will not leave my home, and I will not stop what I want to do. Cronin Gregory will never surrender. Even if you kill me, they will continue. Some things must be resolved." His words were extremely firm. The Witcher's eyes caught his open notebook, which had a line of cursive words on it. "But I have been here, and when people in the future resist oppression and call for heroes, they still have a name to call." He put the 2 letters close to his body, tore off this page, folded it solemnly, and put it in his inner pocket. After doing all this, he was about to leave, and at this moment, there was a slight sound in front of the door. The Witcher's pupils shrank slightly, and he immediately stood in the secluded darkness of the room, holding the vase in his right hand, and the axe's seal in his left hand. He was ready for battle, but unexpectedly, he only heard a girl sobbing softly. After hesitating for a while, Geralt walked out of the room. This time, he did not try to lighten his steps. The clear sound immediately alerted the girl. She immediately got up and shouted in a trembling voice, Who is there?" Geralt's face slowly emerged from the shadows, and the girl immediately relaxed. When the Witcher was still wondering about the girl's reaction, she ran over and hugged the Witcher's arm. The Witcher smelled the scent of lysanthes. The girl cried and said, "They killed him, sir, they killed him." He comforted the silly girl and pulled her into Cronin's study to prevent her from seeing the miserable scene again. After the girl calmed down, Geralt asked, "Who are you?" The girl said with sobs, "Christina Jastov." The girl's long name was very difficult to pronounce. Geralt frowned and said, "I'll just call you Christina." "What's going on? Who are they?" It would have been fine if he didn't mention them. As soon as he mentioned them, the girl started crying again, but she quickly forced herself to calm down and said, "It's Alphonse Willy and his gang. That's Hawthorne. They have been targeting Cronin for a long time. I have always wanted him to leave here with me, but he just doesn't want to." God. Geralt used X on her, and Christina's expression suddenly became dull, and her eyes lost their original spirit. Geralt asked patiently, "Tell me about this Hawthorne." As Christina narrated, Geralt soon learned who this Hawthorne was. Hawthorne, whose original name was Alphonse Willy, was called Hawthorne because of his cruel and ruthless style and his terrible sadistic tendency, which means adopted by a cousin. However, While he has these anti-human characteristics, he is also an avid poetry lover and a patron with artistic taste. Cronin made his mark at an art exhibition 2 years ago, and he was noticed by Hawthorne at that time. Hawthorne wanted him to paint a picture for him, but Cronin was unwilling to do it for some reason. No matter how much money Hawthorne offered, he even pointed at Hawthorne's nose and scolded Hawthorne as a damn oppressor in front of Hawthorne's men. But Hawthorne was not angry. He just gave him good advice and left a lot of money and said he would come again. Cronin donated all the money to the nuns of the Meritly Order. He began to avoid Hawthorne and his men until today, and it seemed that doom had really come. But the Witcher's intuition told him that this was not the case. Hawthorne was a bastard, but if such a cruel person did not turn hostile when being scolded, he must love art terribly. There was no reason for him to write a letter to threaten Cronin and ask him to stop what he was doing. No matter what it was, he could have killed Cronin on the spot to avoid embarrassment in front of his men. You know, for people like them, the prestige of their subordinates is more important than anything else. This doesn't make sense. Geralt asked again. Do you know what Cronin is doing? Christina said dully. I don't know, sir. I asked him, but he just said that he was doing something big. Big thing. Alas. The Witcher sighed silently. He had seen too many people who died for their ideals. The clues were basically clear, but he had one last question. Did you know that Cronin was attacked in the Hierophant Square a week ago? I know. It was Mr. Dale. He was very angry. He was our teacher. Cronin painted a half-length portrait of his wife without his consent last time, so he was very angry. Very good. Do you know where he lives? Chapter 52 Death of the Painter. After sending Christina out of the villa, Geralt, who was relieved only after seeing her return home, did not stop. He immediately went home to change into studded soft armor, breeches and black hard leather boots, and went out with a steel sword, without telling the black-robed wizard what happened, and Shenyan did not ask. Geralt ran wildly in the city. He rushed to the door of the dell at the fastest speed. This was a classic middle-class house, 2-story with a balcony, and the location was good. But the Witcher was not in the mood to pay attention to these things now. He didn't even want to knock on the door politely, but slapped the door hard, and the door banged. An impatient voice said angrily, "Who is it? Damn it, you knock on the door like this in the middle of the day?" He opened the door and saw the tall and murderous Witcher. He was stunned for a moment, and his tone unconsciously weakened. "What do you want? Don't you recognize me?" Geralt said in a low voice. Dale's expression became horrified. He pointed at Geralt and stammered, "I was just impulsive that day. Cronin and I are fine now. Really, if you don't believe me, go ask him." "Oh my God, don't hit me." Geralt pulled him up from the ground, covered his mouth, and took him into the house, closing the door with his foot. He grabbed Dale's collar, looked at the man who was already sweating because of fear, and clenched his fist. "Now, I ask, you answer, what is your relationship with Cronin?" "I'm his teacher." Dale's tone was too fast to be true. It seemed that he was really afraid of being beaten. "Why did you want to stab him with a dagger that day?" "I was just impulsive." "Oh my God, for the God's sake." "I was really just impulsive." He drew a half-length portrait of my Alice, and only I can draw for her. "I was just impulsive. Please don't hit me. Please, please, please." The guy was almost about to cry, and his whole body began to tremble. Geralt let go of his hand in disgust, and Dale immediately stepped back. He retreated to the wall of the living room and said, "I told you everything." At this time, a woman's lazy voice came from upstairs. "What's the noise?" "Dale, is that you?" Dale's voice immediately became loud and full of energy. He said loudly, "It's okay, baby, I'm fine, just warming up my voice." "You are still interested in music? How come I didn't know this?" "It was just at the beginning, baby. It's okay. You go back to sleep." The woman smiled and agreed. Dale returned to his weak appearance, but intentionally or unintentionally blocked the Witcher's sight of looking upstairs. Seeing this, Geralt was silent for a while, and then left his home. He walked on the street, seemingly wandering aimlessly, but in fact he had gradually come to the shanty town. This is the slums in the slums, and only those who don't care about anything will choose to live here. Geralt went into a dark alley, and a guy with tattoos all over his body stood in the dark, with a simple hammer hanging around his waist, sneering at him. "What are you looking at, mutant bastard?" Geralt stared at him without saying a word. The three people beside Tattoo couldn't hold their breath anymore. They gradually surrounded him, their hands already touching the weapons on their waists. "Are your ears filled with cow dung? Can't you hear him asking you what you're looking at?" Geralt still didn't say anything. Silence can really mock people, Tattoo cursed, and he punched the Witcher in the face, but was cut off halfway. The Witcher held the sword in one hand. After the first strike, he did not hesitate to pierce Tattoo's heart with another sword. Tattoo opened his mouth, as if he had not realized what happened yet. Geralt didn't even turn his head. He elbowed the guy who rushed towards him from behind and broke several teeth. Then he pulled out the sword by inertia, spun his body like dancing, and easily cut off two heads. But in the blink of an eye, only one person was left alive. He raised the dagger in his hand, looked at the steel sword in the Witcher's hand that was still dripping with blood, and swallowed his saliva. Geralt didn't waste time talking to him. He wiped the sword on his companion and sheathed it, then kicked the guy to the ground. He rolled on the ground in embarrassment, stood up and wanted to run, but the Witcher's cold voice sounded behind him. "Run if you want to die." He stopped, turned around with a smile on his face, and said, my lord, I apologize to you for him." Geralt strode forward, punched the guy in the face, pushed him against the wall of the alley, and asked coldly, "Don't talk nonsense. I ask you to answer. Dare to hesitate or lie, I will kill you and your family." After saying this, he pointed to his eyes. "You should know what I do." The guy nodded frantically. "Very good. First question, where is Hawthorne?" He did not hesitate and immediately said, "In the underground casino." "Sir, where is the underground casino?" "I'll take you there, okay?" Geralt kicked his knee and broke it. When he screamed, he bent down and picked up the dagger he dropped on the ground, stabbed it into his broken knee and twisted it hard, saying, "Where is the underground casino?" "In the sewer on 3rd Avenue, sir," the guy said while holding back the pain. Geralt looked at him deeply, pulled out the dagger, put his foot in his neck, and left with a click. According to what he said, Geralt soon arrived at 3rd Avenue. He found the sewer door here after many twists and turns, kicked it open and walked in. Not long after, noisy voices and various unpleasant smells came from the front. The Witcher's eyes gleamed in the dim light of the sewer, and he could smell the smell of sweat, alcohol, and tobacco. The noisy voices included both excited screams and angry shouts of frustration. It seemed that there was indeed the casino ahead. After turning a corner, he saw an iron gate. Two tall and muscular men stood in front of the gate. They looked at the slowly approaching Witcher and said, "Stop, ha, I really didn't expect that we would see a mutant freak come to the casino." The one on the left said to the one on the right, "Yeah, hey, you, freak, what are you doing here?" Geralt looked at them and uttered two words, "Looking for someone." The two looked at each other, and their hands were already on the swords at their waists. There was no scabbard, and it was shining with a cold light. It was obvious that it was a standard weapon of the army. "Who do you want to find?" There was a clear sound of sword, and Geralt's hoarse voice mixed with the sound of flesh being cut. "Hawthorne." He chopped off the head of the big man on the left in an instant with the violent sword force. The one on the right roared and chopped at him. The Witcher took a step back to avoid the sword blade that was just a hair's breadth away. He stabbed his heart with a backhanded sword. After doing all this, he formed the altar seal. The light blue telekinesis blasted open the iron door, and flew out and hit a lot of people. A hoarse voice sounded in the scattered smoke and dust. "Who is Hawthorne? I promised to update 5 times. Please vote." This plot is a little longer. I really want to write the feeling of CWPR's mission design with multiple lines going hand in hand, so the update is a little late. Please vote. Chapter 53 Death of the Painter. Alphonse Willy was busy appreciating art paintings in his casino's special office as usual. Don't ask him why he has a special office, and don't ask him why he appreciates paintings in the casino. The last person who asked this question was hacked to death with a hatchet in front of his 7 men. But one thing can be revealed: Alphonse Willy, Hawthorne, was very unhappy at this time. Very unhappy. Although his ugly and fierce face was not very friendly on weekdays, it still made several of his confidants feel a little scared at this time. After all, You never know what Alphonse Willy will do in the next second. Just like now, he suddenly shouted, "Selick, Selick, damn, where's that son of a bitch?" Selick was his accountant. When Selick ran to Alphonse panting, 5 minutes had passed. You can't see any traces of gangs in this special office. The exquisite floor, luxurious decoration, marble table and paintings and sculptures of all sizes filling the whole room make it look more like an artist's office. Alphonse Willy was sitting behind his marble table. Selick couldn't see his expression, so he had to ask in a low voice, "Sir, what do you want to see me for?" At this moment, his voice sounded normal again. "Nothing, Selick, nothing, I just want you to see it." He stood up, pointed to a painting on the easel behind Selick, and said, "What do you think of this painting?" Selick looked back and saw that it was a painting depicting a demon hunter. According to Selick's heart, this painting is very good, but he couldn't figure out what Alphonse was thinking, so he could only mutter, Look, sir, this." Alphonse grabbed the book on the table and threw it on the back of Selick's head, shouting, "Can't you talk or what? Everyone, come and see." My accountant turned out to be an idiot who can't talk. Selick didn't dare to say anything. He bent down to pick up the book, put it on Alphonse's table, and whispered, "It's a very good painting, sir." "Really?" Alphonse calmed down at this time. He asked lightly. Selick's heart was lifted up immediately, and he waited for Alphonse's next words tremblingly. "I think he draws well too. Oh, damn it, it's a pity that he can't stop those people. I guess he will die soon." Alphonse sighed. He went on to say, "This guy finished this painting in the studio 2 days ago. I knew he would never sell the original to me, so I simply asked a student in his studio to copy it for me. Look at the colors, the copy is so good." "Damn it, why is he so upset?" Alphonse became more and more irritable as he spoke. He slapped the marble table and said angrily, "Damn it, why wouldn't he sell it to me?" Selick could only listen with his head down. He didn't even dare to breathe. Who knew this would make Alphonse angry? But he didn't say more. He just threw a bag of money to Selick, sat back in his chair, and said, "Spend it. Don't ask me why, understand?" Selick nodded vigorously and then went out, leaving Alphonse alone in his office looking at the painting in silence. The silence didn't last long. A loud noise almost made Alphonse fall off his chair. He immediately shouted the name of the guard outside his office, but he could hear nothing except screaming. Alphonse Willy suddenly felt something was wrong. He opened a box he had placed under the marble table. Inside was a crossbow. Then, he extinguished the candle, walked to the door of his office, and began to wait with the crossbow in his hand. He heard continuous screams and the sound of flesh falling to the ground, as well as some explosions and the sound of blades cutting through bodies. He knew these sounds very well. Alphonse Willy had gone from being a street thief to one of the 4 major gangsters in Novigrad today. He had killed at least 800 people, if not 1,000. At the same time, there was another footstep getting closer and closer. He did not hide his intention at all. The footsteps stopped outside his office. Alphonse heard a hoarse voice, "Hawthorne." The Witcher looked at the door. He did not hear anyone talking, but his ears told him that there was a breathing sound inside. He looked back at the mess he had made, the broken limbs and flesh all over the ground. Geralt took a deep breath of the bloody air and said, "You can choose to come out now, or I will let you out." Still no one spoke. "It seems you chose the latter." The Witcher kicked the door open. He heard the sound of a bowstring being pulled. A crossbow arrow was shooting towards his head, but before it could make close contact with the Witcher, it was blocked by the sword in his hand. Geralt took a heavy step forward, and his fist hit Alphonse's face accurately and powerfully, knocking him to the ground, and then kicked him in the stomach. The Witcher ignored the weak groaning of the gangster lying on the ground, dragged him out of his office, and threw him directly into the middle of his casino, throwing him with the bodies of his men. Then, he found a good chair and sat on it himself. "Now, let's talk about Cronin Gregory." Alphonse smiled when he heard this, and Hawthorne said with a miserable smile, "The kid is dead, right?" Hawthorne barely stood up from the ground. Geralt was a little surprised. He was sure that the kick he just gave him must have caused internal bleeding. He should be in great pain now. But Hawthorne stood up. Not only that, he picked up a chair leg, stood up straight in a funny posture, and said, "Come on, Mutant freak, if you want to kill me, do it, but before you chop my head off, I hope you remember that what they asked you to do to that kid, they will do to you sooner or later." After that, he roared and rushed towards the Witcher sitting on the chair. Geralt didn't even bother to avoid it. He slightly tilted his head and knocked Hawthorne to the ground with a slap. His body is indeed not bad among ordinary people, but compared with the Witchers, he is as weak as a baby. Cough, cough. "Ah, your fist is really heavy, you bastard." Hawthorne fell to the ground. He coughed twice and spit out a mouthful of blood foam, and his mouth was still dirty. The Witcher crossed his chest leisurely with his hands. His face and body were covered with blood. Hawthorne heard his hoarse voice. "I want to ask you a question." Chapter 54 Death of the Painter. What is there to ask? You killed him, that's all. I hope you burn in hell for 10,000 years after you die. You mutant freak who doesn't understand art. Do you know that you killed an artist whose instincts were recorded in history with your own hands? Bastard. Hawthorne cursed at him, not caring about his current situation at all. He suppressed his emotions and said calmly, "Let's not talk about whether I will go to hell or not. If I am, then you will definitely be there too, and much earlier than me." Hawthorne. Now, let's talk about Cronin Gregory. No way. I tell you, you white-haired bastard with cat eyes. Did your mother have sex with a cat, huh? You. Geralt was in no mood to listen to him scolding anymore. The axe's sign flashed, and Alphonse's face became dull. Geralt asked, "Did you send someone to kill Cronin Gregory?" "Not me." "Do you know who it was?" "Councilman Carlisle Vincent." "Why?" Hawthorne's eyes were numb. He was like a question-and-answer machine, only answering the Witcher's questions. "Cronin is playing with fire. He wants to get the councillors of Novigrad out of office. He thinks this will make things better for the poor. For the sake of his family, most councillors didn't say anything because he couldn't succeed. But his undisguised actions still angered Carlisle Vincent. His threats were blocked by me several times. I don't want Cronin to die. He is a painter with a promising future." How ironic. The Witcher sighed slightly. He had seen countless strange things in his long life, but if he had to make a list, this thing would definitely be on the list, and it would be at the top. The councillors who were supposed to make the citizens live a better life wanted to kill an innocent young man, and the gangster boss with blood on his hands and countless crimes wanted to protect him. Geralt then asked, "His family? Is that Gregory?" "Damn, I should have realized it before." "Yes." The Witcher realized at this moment that he might have been involved in a political vortex without realizing it. The Gregory family can be traced back to 300 years ago, when there was a wealthy merchant named Gregory. Novigrad was in the midst of famine, so Gregory donated half of his property to import food from the Nether. He saved the entire city and allowed countless people to survive. After his death, he was worshipped as a saint. No one can change his status, not even the big and small religions and councillors in the city. Even today, Novigrad still has a magnificent bridge named after him, the Bridge of St. Gregory, connecting the Temple Island to the main city. Every day, countless people go to pay homage to his statue in the middle of the bridge. But he had no choice. Whether it was personal feelings or the complicated feelings after hearing what Cronin Gregory had done, he decided to do this to the end. What do you know about this Carlisle Vincent? He is the councillor who has the most hope of becoming mayor this term. He is in the mining business and has a rich family background. He has several wizards protecting him. I have tried to take action against him several times but failed. TSK, wizard. Geralt asked again, "Where does the Gregory family live?" "They don't live in the city. Gregory's descendants moved out during the turmoil 70 years ago. Go straight out of the gate and you can see a large piece of farmland. That's where they live now." After asking what he wanted to know, Geralt managed to make Hawthorne faint. The method may be a bit rough, but he didn't care. In his opinion, Hawthorne's death 10 times is not enough. The things this guy did can make the devils in hell quarrel over the ownership of his soul. And he didn't take Hawthorne's revenge seriously at all. As long as this gangster boss still has a little bit of brains, he will not come to trouble the Witcher. What's more, by the time he wakes up and finds out where he is, the Witcher will probably have done the job. Late at night, the demon hunter returned home. His blood all over his body had dried. Taking off his armor and boots, He sat opposite Shenyan and began to clean the remaining blood on the sword. The black-robed wizard looked up from his book and asked, "Did you enjoy going out to kill during the day?" "Not bad," the demon hunter replied. "You've been the talk of the town today. Even someone like me who doesn't go out can hear people on the street shouting the demon hunter is causing trouble in the Hawthorne casino." Hawthorne. Why did he give himself such a name? He may think it's an honor. People are afraid of him and scold him, but he doesn't take it seriously. Instead, he uses it as his nickname, which makes him seem stronger and easier to do things. "Sometimes I think you are a bit like a philosopher." Geralt looked at his eyes on the steel sword and said, "No, I'm a mutant killer without emotions and who takes human life lightly." "Well, you're also good at telling jokes." The demon hunter's smile flashed across his lips, and he said lightly, "The young man died and drew a picture for me." "Oh." The black-robed wizard put down the book and said seriously, "If you need help, just tell me." "No, I've done my job," the demon hunter replied, and his mind flashed back to the scene he saw when he went to the Gregory family this afternoon. They were dwindling in numbers, and the white-haired old woman almost fainted when she saw him. But when Geralt explained his purpose, she calmed down again. She began to command her subordinates in an orderly manner, issuing orders one after another. Geralt knew that one of the counselors, or the Gregory family, would be completely destroyed. He hoped it would be the former. But then again, what could he, a witcher, do? Of course, he could kill some monsters and destroy the gangs at leisure, but the counselors and the local big families were another concept. Wealth is often more terrifying than swords. "It seems that you are quite quick." The black-robed wizard smiled, and then said seriously, "No, Geralt, I have a feeling that this matter will not end like this." "What?" the black-robed wizard said softly, "Although I don't know what you did, but before you came back, 3 or 4 groups of city guards have run through the streets outside. I guess if they were just patrolling, they would not run so fast. And some strangers are beginning to appear around our house." After saying this, he picked up the book and continued to read it, leaving only the last sentence. "It's not over yet, Geralt." The witcher closed his eyes, and his mind began to recall the painter's body again. He opened his eyes and said, "Yes, it's not over yet. There will be 5 updates tomorrow, and I will try to finish this paragraph." If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelist. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We are waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 55, Death of the Painter. "Witcher, here is a letter for you." Geralt turned around and saw a child calling him. Seeing him turn around, the child hurried over and took out a letter from the bag on his waist. After handing it to him, he bowed and said, "Greetings from the Gregory family, Master Witcher." After saying that, he ran away. The Witcher watched him go away, lowered his head and opened the letter. A fragrance wafted out, and he began to read the letter. "Dear Geralt of Rivia, first of all, I would like to extend my sincere greetings to you. Thank you for your just act. The Gregory family will not forget it. Secondly, I think it is necessary for me to inform you about the final fate of Cayley Vincent. If you have been paying attention to the newspapers recently, you should know that his mining business has been acquired by us, and he himself may be begging on the roadside now. I hope he will get sick in a few years and die in the cold with a heart full of pain. I don't know how you will see me, but I think revenge is a virtue. Revenge is not a stupid game or a meaningless and empty act as poets and philosophers say. Revenge is the last thing that allows a mother like me who has lost her beloved son to taste happiness. Finally, I want to tell you about Corona. I know he is a paranoid child, but I didn't know he was so paranoid. He wanted to overthrow the political structure of Novigrad that had lasted for hundreds of years by himself, which is tantamount to playing with fire and getting burned. I think his death may also be related to me. If I hadn't been immersed in the pain of losing my husband, he probably wouldn't be like this. But things are unpredictable, Master Witcher. If you are willing to read the crazy talk of an old woman like me until now, I think I need to tell you something. Fate is fickle. Fate made our family move out of the political center of Novigrad 70 years ago, made my husband die in regret, made my son full of hatred for those high-ranking senators, and made him a person who sympathizes with the weak and cares for the poor. But in the end, he died miserably. Let me stop here, Master. I'm sure you are tired of reading it. Please keep your distance from us. Although Cale Vincent has fallen, his companions have not. If you get too close to us, you may be implicated. But I must express my gratitude to you, and words are not enough. If you want, please come to the Temple of Melancholy at 7 o'clock tomorrow night, and you will receive the gratitude of the Gregory family and our insignificant but eternal friendship. Your friend, a mother who lost her son. He folded the letter again, put it in the envelope, and stuffed it into the inner wall of his armor. My friend Geralt is a person who likes to express himself with sarcasm in most cases. He rarely has facial expressions, and only when he is with familiar people will his face reveal some subtle expressions. In my many years of friendship with him, we have experienced many things, and I believe my readers also have some impression of this. Whether it is catching vampires together in Novigrad, or my love-hate relationship with the Duchess, you should all be quite familiar with it. I will not lie to my readers, so I want to tell you a new story and clarify one thing again. He is not the emotionless killer or a monster that the public says, or a freak who can do anything for money. He is a living person, a person with noble character, who dares to draw the sword for innocent people. In my eyes, he is more of a knight than a demon hunter. Although he lives a rather embarrassing life in most cases, it does not affect him. After drinking one time, Geralt talked to me about a past event. I forgot how he started, but I was very impressed by this story. Please listen to me carefully. It was at the end of 1233, when Geralt traveled to Novigrad with the famous black-robed wizard. They lived there for a while, and Geralt took on some commissions from water ghosts in the city to make a living. While the black-robed wizard was just like the most profound impression he left on the world, he stayed in the house all day reading. The days passed one by one, until December of 1233, when Geralt met a young man in the square, Cronin Gregory. He was a young painter, who was attacked by his jealous teacher's wife in the Hierophant Square because he painted a half-length portrait of his teacher without permission. Geralt happened to pass by, and he heroically saved the young man. And the story begins here. Cronin was very excited. He wanted to draw a picture for Geralt. Yes, that picture, Geralt of Rivia, the picture that made our Witcher famous all over the world. At this time, it was just a prototype. Geralt said that he sat there all morning that day. People were coming and going in the Hierophant Square, but Cronin was focused on the work in his hands. When the first version was finally completed, the hungry Witcher had no intention of looking at the painting. In this case, he was still shocked by the rough first version, although I doubt that he could not tell the difference between the first version and the finished version like me. His poor taste in art is well known. So, Cronin Gregory and our Geralt agreed to go to his house a week later to see the finished version of the painting. Geralt should not have been interested in art, but he was obsessed that day, or perhaps it was fate. He kept the appointment on time that day. But when he arrived at Cronin's house, he saw the body of the poor painter. In order to respect him as an artist, I will not describe his appearance here. Please forgive me. And the Witcher showed rare anger. He found the real murderer of the painter's death within a day. City Councilman Carlisle Vincent. He died in 1235 and his body was not found on the street for half a month. It is worth mentioning that the underground gang boss of Novigrad at that time, Hawthorne, was also beaten half to death by Geralt in this incident. He himself is a fan of my poetry and a patron of art with great taste. Then, it is something that everyone is familiar with. After the Gregory family learned the real murderer, they kicked Carlisle Vincent out of his office within 3 days, bought his business, and let him live on the streets. In my opinion, he deserved it. Let's not discuss whether Cronin Gregory's thoughts are correct, but he is just a young man, and he didn't do anything bad in his short life. On the contrary, his reputation in the shanty towns is unmatched. People know that he is a kind-hearted person. His death may be a loss in our art history, but my evaluation of him is just like the words engraved on the statue next to the statue of his ancestors on the bridge of St. Gregory. But I have been here, so that people in later generations who resist oppression and cry out for heroes will still have a name to call upon. Dandelion, half a century of poetry, also known as Memoirs of a Poet. Chapter 56 Kaer Morhen, 1234. If you have traveled on the road from Novigrad to Kaer Morhen during this period, or if you are a resident of the villages between the two, you will most likely see a white-haired demon hunter carrying two swords and a black-robed wizard riding by. Don't get me wrong, they are not traveling companions. Although they are indeed traveling together, the demon hunter does not think that the black-robed wizard is his traveling companion at all. You are simply my boss, am I not? The black-robed wizard looked up at the demon hunter from the book and smiled and said, "Don't forget, Geralt, it has been a few months, and the monsters you killed the most are water ghosts that can be killed by a child with a crossbow." Hearing this, the demon hunter was silent, although he didn't want to admit it. The title of Water Ghost Slayer of the Sewer Guard in Novigrad was indeed well named. He had killed so many water ghosts recently that he began to doubt himself. Am I a water ghost hunter or a demon hunter? Putting these aside, their goal of this trip is Kaer Morhen. It was an old castle, the training base for the Wolf School Witchers. Geralt spent his childhood there. He was going back now to see Vesemir, although he was not sure whether the energetic old man was there. Even if he was not, he could clean the castle and leave some supplies for Askar and Lambert who might come back. In addition, the pterodactyls in the mountains beside the castle had been bothering them for a long time. The Witcher planned to kill them this spring, which was also an explanation to the black-robed wizard. He had almost forgotten the content of their initial deal. The wizard just said that he wanted to see how the Witcher killed those monsters, but he had been killing weak water ghosts these days, which didn't seem to count. What's more, he actually wanted to prove himself. I am a qualified Witcher, not some damn water ghost slayer. They set out from Novigrad, leaving the Pearl of the North where they had lived for a while, and returned to the countryside. On the way, he didn't see any commissions worth accepting, so he could only kill some evil ghosts, water ghosts, and Androg in exchange for commissions. The black-robed wizard became addicted to Gwent during this journey. Geralt actually suspected that he didn't like playing cards, but liked to see the people who played cards with him scratching their heads. He had never seen a Shenyan lose. They passed through Tridogel, crossed the mountains, and returned to Gwen, this bitter and cold land. Then there was another difficult journey over the mountains. At least it was difficult enough for the demon hunter. In March of the same year, they finally arrived at Kaer Morhen. The castle was built on the mountain, and the mountains behind it were covered with snow that never melted all year round. There were green trees all around, and the scenery was pleasant. But the castle was not so beautiful. It had long been dilapidated, with broken eaves and broken walls, and the walls were covered with ivy. They crossed another gully and set foot on a mountain road. From there, Kaer Morhen could be seen from afar, squeezed between a pile of stone walls, the defense walls that collapsed to the point that only the footrests were left, the remaining towers and gates, and the heavy and thick cylindrical main tower. Geralt took him through the gate that was very narrow compared to the castle itself and entered the overgrown courtyard. In a corner of the courtyard were scattered several wooden dummies and training swords. Those swords were blunt. Noticing the wizard's gaze, Geralt explained to him, "We used to recruit apprentices, but now, no one has done this for many years." Shenyan nodded gently. He read this history from the book, which was very heavy and sad. They tied up the horses and brought them fresh hay. Then Geralt went into the castle, leaving the wizard standing alone in the courtyard to observe this castle with a long history. He walked through the heavy bricks, stepped on the moss, and even picked a few leaves of creeper and put them in his magic backpack. He could see the intention of the castle's design. It was designed to be a castle that could withstand a long siege. Although its fortifications failed to prevent the massacre of Witchers 100 years ago, in its glory days it could repel attacks from large armies. The multiple levels of the building allowed for the garrisoning of troops, while the relatively small central courtyard made it easier to defend on the outer walls. The castle's defenders were protected by thick walls, moats and drawbridges, and narrow gates, which provided additional protection. The garrison could draw water from a well in the courtyard, Kaer Morhen stood quietly above the mountains of the wilderness and in the wild forests. It was close to the peaks of the Blue Mountains and towered in the clouds. Below was a valley filled with mist, and several small streams converged into the White Stone River. Standing on the walls, the view was uninhabited, and all that could be seen were birds flying in the woods and grizzly bears and wolves wandering in the mountains. Kaer Morhen means the ancient sea fortress. Shenyan had already stood on the wall, overlooking the scenery of the place, thinking about the history of the Witchers he had read in books. Because of their unusual, uncommon powers and magical skills, Witchers are treated as outcasts and sometimes even resented. Years ago, a group of zealots launched a persecution of Witchers, inciting peasants to mob with lies and illegal publications such as The Tale of a Monster Hunter and Monsters, Portraits of Witchers. Volume 1, a traitorous cat faction which revealed the location of Kaer Morhen to the mob, so the mob surrounded Kaer Morhen. At the time, there were 23 Witchers and 40 apprentices living in Kaer Morhen, but they were too few for the attackers. The mob, with the help of an unknown sorceress, captured Kaer Morhen and massacred all the Witchers in the castle at the time. Vesemir, Geralt's mentor, survived by hiding under the bodies of the dead, and a few other Witchers who were working outside escaped the massacre. Now, only the corpses left in the castle moat and under the bridge, as well as the leaflets scattered everywhere, can make people remember this massacre. It is sad and heavy, as they are much stronger than humans. They not only did not benefit from this ability, but were persecuted on the contrary. Most demon hunters are poor and destitute throughout their lives, and injuries and near death are commonplace. If they are given a choice, many people may choose to give up this power and become ordinary people again, but unfortunately they can't do it anymore. Everything has disappeared with the wind. He heard footsteps and turned his head. Geralt had taken off his soft armor and was working in a coat. The demon hunter holding a mop looked a little ridiculous. Noticing his gaze, the demon hunter rolled his eyes and said, "If you don't want to help, then." He didn't finish his words because Shenyan snapped his fingers lightly. Chapter 57 Preparations before Dragon Hunting. As the Witcher stared in amazement, the dilapidated castle was changing rapidly. The weed-covered courtyard became tidy, the wooden mannequins became iron, and the training swords became sharp. The weeds disappeared in an instant. The outer walls, which were only left with scaffolding, were also repaired. They became thick and majestic again. The tower tops that used to leak were also repaired and even covered with red bricks. The mottled marks on the gate disappeared. It was originally just a fence door, but now it has become 2 iron doors, reflecting silver light under the sunlight. The Witcher looked back and saw that the hall in the house had become magnificent. The mottled walls and cracked floors were gone, and even the long tables were made of oak. He didn't see what other places had become, but judging by the situation, it was probably better than the most expensive inn Geralt had ever stayed in. The black-robed wizard walked down the city wall leisurely and asked, "How is it?" The Witcher looked around at the brand-new castle and said dryly, "I've never seen her so beautiful, perhaps even more beautiful than she originally looked. I'm very grateful to you. But I don't know why you did this." Just think of it as an impulse on my part," Shenyan replied. He patted Geralt on the shoulder, walked into the hall, took out a bottle of wine from a box in the corner, and read the name on it, East of the East. "It sounds like a good wine." Geralt turned around and walked in, closing the door. "Actually, that's not a good wine." Shenyan raised his eyebrows, patted the bottle, and the magic opened the cork. He conjured up a cup, poured in the wine, and a fragrance immediately spread out. He shook the glass in his hand and smiled. "It seems that this bottle of wine disagrees with you." Geralt's throat rolled up and down, and he licked his lips. East of East is not a wine that can be found everywhere. This is a very high-end and expensive wine. It matures in the famous wine cellars of Castel Ravelo. This wine has a strong smoky smell, which is the biggest surprise for first-time tasters. Years of maturation in Beauclair oak barrels make the wine taste thick and rich. How precious is this wine? East of East, regarded as one of Toussaint's many treasures, is the most famous wine produced in the area. No one knows when the first batch of East came out, but it is certain that it was around a time when people first settled in the current territory of the principality. This wine became popular during the reign of Adela Marta, who liked East of East very much and therefore designated Castelraulo as the official vineyard of the principality. She also reserved a special place for East of East in the cellar of the Beauclair Palace. To this day, a ceremony is held every year to store 2 barrels of the wine of that year on the shelf. According to the principality law sacred East wine order, if you open these barrels by yourself, you will be sentenced to death and tied to the back of the wagon train and dragged to death. Geralt has never drunk this kind of wine, but he has seen it. It was an auction, and this wine was sold at a high price of 5,000 crowns. Just one bottle. Geralt's eyes were fixed on the bottle of East of the East. The wizard put it on the table and took a sip. He laughed and commented, "This is really quite good. Geralt, are you sure you don't want to try it?" This sentence started a drunkard's drinking journey. The two of them drank the bottle of East of the East, and then Geralt drank all 34 bottles of wine in the basement of Kaer Morhen in 2 hours. He drank wildly and even jumped on the table with his boots on to tell the black-robed wizard a joke. The joke was indeed very funny. Geralt said he heard it in an inn. It was not until late at night that Geralt's drinking spree came to an end. When he woke up the next morning, he realized how ridiculous he had done. If Vesemir knew that he had drunk all his wine, he would not be able to return to Kaer Morhen in the next 3 or 4 years. Geralt lay on the floor groaning. He had a splitting headache and could smell the vomit and strong smell of alcohol on his clothes. Damn it. At noon the next day, instead of riding horses, they walked up the mountain along a path. The Witcher found a usable longbow from the castle's armory and planned to hunt a deer as bait to attract pterodactyls. As they walked, he explained to the black-robed wizard, "Generally speaking, to kill these flying beasts, we must use bait to lure them to the ground. Although they can fly, their IQ is not high, and they prefer certain tastes. Pterodactyls like to eat deer." We didn't realize that there was a nest of pterodactyls here until 3 years ago when Vesemir complained that he couldn't hunt deer. Then we thought about it in this direction. Later, Lambert was attacked by a pterodactyl when he went out hunting. He had a big scar on his back. If he hadn't run fast, he might have died there. Well, bait is a good method. But I have a question, the black-robed wizard said. Do you rely on silver swords to deal with such large monsters? What about sword oil? You remember the knowledge in those books very well. Geralt smiled and said, "Sword oil is very precious. I won't use it unless I have to." And pterodactyls come out alone to forage for food, so silver swords and crossbows are enough to deal with them. If that doesn't work, there are alchemical bombs. It seems that the cost of sword oil is a problem. Yes, for example, the materials in the bodies of 5 ghouls plus about 150 crowns of alchemical materials can produce a small bottle of ghoul bio oil. We rarely use it unless necessary. Sometimes a bottle of oil can even be preserved for several years. They walked down the mountain and came to a stream. Geralt squatted down, scooped up the water and took a sip, then began to observe the hoof prints on the ground. "Go east. In the woods. Wait for me here." 15 minutes later, Geralt walked out of the woods carrying a deer with an arrow stuck in its head. The black-robed wizard was sitting on the grass at this time. He saw the deer and said, "Even if you don't become a demon hunter, you will be a good hunter." Geralt threw the deer on the ground and wiped the sweat from his forehead. "In fact, I really did become a demon hunter. I don't know why even water ghosts didn't appear during that period. I had no choice but to become a hunter. My skinning skills are pretty good." They chatted for a while, then went back to the castle and began to prepare for the afternoon dragon hunting operation. As usual, I'll post the 3rd update here first, then continue after dinner and ask for votes. Chapter 58 Pterodactyl and Female Night Devil. Okay, we're almost ready. Geralt squatted in the bushes nearby. He was not wearing the studded soft armor, but a leather armor, with 3 alchemical bombs hanging on his waist and 15 arrows on his back. He put his sword and the crossbow with arrows on the ground, ready to grab the sword and run out at any time. Shenyan squatted beside him. He was not wearing the black robe, like Geralt. He was wearing a black leather armor. Geralt took a look at him and commented, "To my surprise, you don't have a little belly like them." Them? Those wizards. The wizard patted the biceps of his right hand and said, I pay great attention to exercise. Ha! After we finish this job, we can go back and have a competition. You may be good at magic, but you can never beat me in arm wrestling. I hold the opposite attitude. Just wait and see. Let's bet 2 bottles of wine. If my memory serves me correctly, you drank all the wine yesterday. You can brew it again and come back next year. That's next year's matter. They chatted in low voices. The deer stood up on the open space not far from them, supported by 4 wooden sticks by Geralt, and put it in a posture as if it was eating grass with its head down. The poor beast's internal organs were hollowed out, and Geralt painted it with a pungent paint. According to him, this paint is very old, and no one knows who discovered it, but it can attract pterodactyls and many other monsters. That thing is really smelly. I know, that's why they like to eat it. Have you seen some beautiful monsters in all these years? Shenyan suddenly became interested, or rather, all men have some interest in this aspect. In this regard, even saints are not immune. Geralt's eyes suddenly became erratic, and he said hesitantly, well, you know, there is, but I'm not sure whether to say it. Okay, but you can't laugh when I say it. Yeah, there was that one time. Go on. Female night demon. Geralt was about to explain this creature, but he heard a cry, and his face immediately became serious. A huge flying monster swooped down from the sky and flew straight towards the deer. It only has 2 hind claws, and the parts that should have been front claws have become 2 huge wings, which also give them unparalleled flying ability among sub-dragon species. And the tail is not to be underestimated. Geralt grabbed the crossbow on the ground and aimed patiently. When the pterodactyl was about to catch the bait, he pulled the trigger. A silver arrow flew out and hit the pterodactyl's right wing accurately in an instant. Geralt whistled excitedly, grabbed the sword amid the monster's screams of pain, and rushed out in one step. Shenyan couldn't accurately describe what happened next. He was a qualified wizard, and a master of boxing and fighting, but he knew nothing about swordsmanship, not to mention that the swordsmanship Geralt was using now was like dancing. He really seemed to be performing a waltz with the pterodactyl. The roar of the pterodactyl and the sound of the demon hunter's blade cutting through the air were their accompaniment, and the heavy stomping of its claws on the ground and the light movement of the demon hunter were their special dance steps. The two cooperated seamlessly, and the pterodactyl never hit the demon hunter once. Geralt was not in a hurry. He wasted the pterodactyl's physical strength bit by bit, letting it bleed, and finally, after careful planning, Geralt killed the pterodactyl with a precise stab. The stab hit the pterodactyl's eyes. Geralt didn't care about the pterodactyl's dying counterattack. He twisted the blade fiercely, and the silver sword caused more damage to the pterodactyl during the rotation. This was not over yet. As if he wanted to show off or to avoid the name of Water Ghost Slayer, he actually used the altar sign to vibrate the hilt of the sword. The huge telekinesis carried the sword through the other side of the pterodactyl's head. Geralt was panting. He faced Shenyan, who came out, pointed at the dead pterodactyl behind him, and said, "How is it?" The wizard clapped his hands and didn't hesitate to praise him, but his next sentence made the Witcher smile even brighter. "Now, why don't we talk about the female night demon?" The Witcher squatted down. He took out the dagger at his waist, and prepared to start cutting the pterodactyl's head. While doing this bloody work, he said, "It was almost 10 years ago. I traveled to Vengerberg. At that time, I had just finished the last order and had some money in my hand, so I planned to have some fun. I won't judge your little habits, Geralt. I don't care. Anyway, the boss didn't lie to me. He really has a good girl." "Describe their appearance?" "I've seen that one now, but she is really beautiful, different from humans. The first time you see her, you will understand that this is a kind of beauty beyond the species." Ignoring the horns on her head and the pair of hooves, she is actually no different from a human, but because of this, you know what I mean, it's even more exciting. But they are really difficult to deal with. I felt like I was stuck in the mud and was almost eaten up by her. About 3 days. I ran out after threatening her, for the sake of the gods. It was really. The wizard also squatted down. He took out a small bottle from somewhere, collected some of the pterodactyl's blood, and commented, Although I am reluctant to say this, I am a little envious of you, an old man who is so romantic." Geralt cut off the pterodactyl's head and threw it aside. He began to dissect the monster's chest on the spot, intending to take out precious alchemical materials such as dragon heart and liver. He said, "First, I am considered young among the Witchers. Second, is this considered romantic? Come on, are you showing off to me?" "Wait." The Witcher suddenly stopped. He turned his head, looked at Shenyan and said, "Did you hear it?" Shenyan looked up at the sky. He pointed to the huge shadow swooping down from the other side, and said, "It seems we have a new visitor." He clapped his hands, and a light blue circular shield covered the area around him and Geralt, and even considerately protected the mutilated pterodactyl's body. The Witcher grabbed his bloody sword, narrowed his eyes. His pupils became elongated, and he whispered, "That thing doesn't look like a pterodactyl." "Yes, because it is not at all," the wizard said seriously. Chapter 59 The Man Who Came Back from the Dead. Shenyan focused his magic power on his eyes. He could see clearly what it was from a distance. It was something that should not appear in this medieval magical world. It was an airplane. Shenyan could not tell its model, but it was definitely not small. Its wings were spitting fire and it looked like it was about to crash, but it was still some distance from the ground. However, with just this distance, the shadow cast by the airplane covered the entire open space. He estimated that if this thing completely hit the ground, he would not be able to keep Kaer Morhen, which he had restored yesterday. "Okay, Geralt, you'd better take its heart and liver, and then stand next to me." The demon hunter did as he was told, and he did not ask why, because the thing in the sky was beyond his knowledge. Shenyan removed the magic barrier, and he pushed his hands up suddenly. An invisible force made the plane stop in the air, and the wizard slowly rose and came into the air. Thick smoke was billowing, and he couldn't see the interior of the cabin with his naked eyes, so he used a little trick to allow him to see through things. I know some people want to learn this, but the strange thing happened here. The plane was empty. He could see the passengers' suitcases, the food on the dining cart, the towels and slippers in the cabinet, and even the coffee in the cockpit was still steaming, but the entire plane was empty. "This is really a ghost," he muttered to himself, clenching his right fist, and the ice instantly froze the entire plane, and gradually dissipated after a minute. Since there was no one inside, he didn't need to consider the safety of the passengers' lives. Shenyan moved his fingers, and the door of the cabin was opened, and he slowly walked in. He entered the plane and the first thing he saw on the ground was the USA Today newspaper, June 14, 2005. The newspaper floated up and he saw the front page. Shenyan couldn't help but smile. "Ha, this is fucking interesting." The front page news was a big green guy holding a tank barrel in his hand and roaring at the sky. "I don't know who took this photo, it's really skillful and desperate." Shenyan is very familiar with this green guy. Who the hell is this if not Hulk? The problem is that the Hulk in his cognition did not appear in 2005, but in 2003. So, parallel universe, TSK. He smacked his lips and turned to the next page. Apart from the social commentators' attacks and criticisms on Congress, there were also the gains of various stocks. There was nothing new. He saw Stark Company and rolled his eyes without surprise. Well, Tony Stark, this bastard company is really thriving. He put the newspaper on the seat beside him and continued to walk forward. What happened next was even more incredible to him. On the seat in front of him, there was a newspaper, also USA Today, but the date was November 13, 2010. The headline was a photo of a man in gold and red armor flying in the night sky. The big bold letters told the editor's question, "Iron Man? Tony Stark? Savior or Destroyer?" The subtitle touched Shenyan's heart. How can you believe that a playboy will turn over a new leaf and save the world? Interesting. He scratched his chin and continued to move forward. With every step he took, he found new newspapers, and the dates on them pushed forward until he was familiar with the year 2023, when he made up his mind to leave. The interesting thing about these newspapers is that Shenyan knew all the people reported on them. Even their faces were exactly the same, but the time points were wrong, and it seemed that he was not involved in the things that happened. "What is this? A newspaper that traveled through time and space," he said to himself. A voice took over his words in Chinese. No, it's me who traveled through time and space. Shenyan raised his eyebrows, and he turned his head to see a bald woman in a yellow robe. She was very beautiful, not the kind of beautiful that makes you want to marry me, but beautiful like a goddess. She was also someone he was very familiar with, his teacher. Shenyan looked at her with complicated eyes and asked, "Why are you here?" Guyi deliberately frowned, and she said, "It's been a long time since we last met, and you don't even want to call me teacher?" "Teacher, that's more like it," Guyi said with a smile. She found a seat by the window and sat down, patted the seat next to her, and motioned Shenyan to sit over there as well. After he sat down, Ancient One said, "Do you feel confused? Do you have a lot of questions that you want to solve?" "Yes, that's right, you idiot. How dare you tear out half of your soul to assimilate the world barrier to travel through the world? You really don't take your life seriously, and you scold Strange for following the rules? I think you are reckless. Don't talk. Do you think I will let you go if you don't talk? If you are not lucky, I would not be talking to you here now." Ancient One's tone suddenly softened. She patted Shenyan on the shoulder and said softly, "I know you have been thinking about going home for a long time, but this is not something that can be solved overnight. You were too impulsive at the time." "I know," Shenyan replied. He raised his head and looked at the white ceiling of the cabin. "I just can't stand it anymore, teacher. I can't continue to stay in a place where there are shadows of my world everywhere, but it is not my world. It is more painful to be false than to be completely opposite. I can't ask for it." Guyi tapped his heart, and the plane suddenly disappeared, except for the two seats. They sat in the air, and Guyi said, "You may have many questions, such as whether I am dead or not, why I can cross the world to find you, and what this plane is, and those newspapers. I want to ask you, do you really want to know?" Looking at Guyi's green eyes, Shenyan nodded. "But I won't tell you." Guyi showed a naughty smile. She laughed. "You don't really think I will tell you everything? Find the answer yourself." She laughed for a while before stopping and said the last sentence, "It's not that I don't want to, but I can't." Then, she broke into pieces and disappeared. Starting from the face, her body broke into pieces, flying in the air like catkins, and finally gathered in Shenyan's hands, forming a green gem and a note. The note read, "Go to the White Tower Council. Today's update is over." This paragraph is actually a foreshadowing, which is expected to be revealed later. It involves the worldview I constructed. I call it the so big that I'm going to die, but there is no other way but to find a setting to justify my self-worldview. Of course, I'm kidding. How could an author give his worldview such a name? Ha ha, ha ha, ha. Chapter 60, A Little Bit of Understanding. "So, you're not going to talk about what that thing is?" Geralt and Shenyan were sitting in the hall of Kaer Morhen. A gold and silver chandelier hung from the ceiling, illuminating the entire hall. Even the murals on the ceiling were restored by the wizard. Shenyan was holding the green gem in his hand in a trance. Geralt squatted on the ground. In front of him was a bathtub with a long piece of meat in it, pink and crimson. The demon hunter was holding a pipe from somewhere in his mouth, processing the meat. His technique was like that of an experienced butcher, peeling the skin, pulling out the tendons, and dividing the muscles, without any ambiguity. "Ah, believe me, Geralt, that thing has nothing to do with you and your world, so just skip it," Shenyan said casually. Now he only had this gem in his hand. The note from Ancient One also disappeared with the wind after he finished reading it. And this gem, no matter how you look at it, is just an ordinary gem. There is no magic fluctuation, no hidden secret language, and no possible mechanism. It was really just an ordinary green gemstone. It could be sold for a sum of money at best, and it couldn't be sold at a high price because it was already cut into a certain shape. TSK. The wizard placed the gemstone on the table and rubbed his brow in distress. The Ancient One used to like to give him this kind of riddles. God knows how much he hates the riddler. And now, the Ancient One has come back to life, traveled through the world, and threw him a bunch of riddles. Forget it. He couldn't figure it out, so he decided to put all these questions behind him. It would be a waste of time to think about it now, so he should do something that interests him first. The Witcher was still dealing with the remains of the pterodactyl. After the plane disappeared into thin air, Geralt asked the wizard to move his fingers so that the dragon could follow them back to the castle, in the form of a corpse. When asked why he cherished a pterodactyl so much, the demon hunter sighed helplessly. I drank all of Vesemar's wine. In order to prevent him from coming back and kicking my ass, I have to give him some compensation. For example, make him a pair of dragon leather boots or something. Shenyan thought of this and suddenly became interested. He asked, well, are you interested in a set of dragon leather armor to wear? A complex magic circle suddenly lit up in the wizard's hand. Geralt looked up at him, confused. Why, you can also make armor? Shenyan smiled and nodded mysteriously. I know a little. Half an hour later, they came to the basement of Kaer Morhen. A soft ball of light lit up in the wizard's hand, illuminating the entire basement. Seeing this, Geralt put down the candle in his hand and expressed his envy again. Damn, why are spells so convenient? Don't you know a little bit? What I know is nothing compared to what you can do. Shenyan shrugged. Geralt put down a piece of skin from his back, and the skin stirred up a puddle of dust on the table in the basement. The skins of a pterodactyl cannot be said to be very hard, but it is definitely first class in terms of flexibility. It is a good material for making leather armor. After their skin is specially treated, it can even make it impenetrable to arrows, let alone swords. Unless a sword is inlaid with rune stones, it is impossible to pierce their leather armor. Of course, with such good skin, there is a reason why pterodactyls have not been killed to date. First, they are too dangerous, and second, their skin is very difficult to process. It must be processed by skilled craftsmen. The highlight is here. Demon hunters generally have no money, so they can't find good craftsmen. It's your turn to perform. Geralt spread his hands and stepped back to watch the show. The wizard's hand lit up again, and the whole piece of skin flew up after being briefly illuminated. The white light in his hand was bright, and Geralt watched as the rough and even bloody leather changed into a set of exquisite leather armor in an instant. The shoulder armor, elbow wrist guards, chest and back were all engraved with complex patterns, and the red and black colors contained a powerful magic that captivated the heart. It even gave Geralt an illusion. He felt that the leather armor was breathing. In fact, it was not his illusion. How is it? Shenyan motioned him to come forward and take a look. The demon hunter walked forward absent-mindedly, and the way he stroked the leather armor was like stroking a lover, gentle and loving, even making the mage feel a chill. Geralt, I know my craftsmanship is very good, but you don't have to show that expression. After being reminded, the demon hunter immediately came back to his senses, and he restored his expression to his usual indifference, or it would be better to call it stuffy. Geralt held the leather armor in his hands. He looked like he was eager to put it on right now. Shenyan raised his eyebrows and said, didn't you say you would give Vesemar some compensation in case he kicks your ass when he gets home? Yes, but I'm talking about a pair of boots, not this treasure, Geralt said seriously, holding the leather armor, and walked upstairs. The wizard shook his head helplessly, and the two returned to the hall again. The Witcher immediately took off his bloody shirt, ran to the other end of the corner of the hall to drag out his suitcase, and found a relatively clean one to put on. That's not all. He even ran to the second floor of the castle to get a mirror, put it in front of the fireplace, and then started to put on the leather armor. Even if Shenyan didn't want to, he had to admit that the Witcher's figure was indeed good. After putting on the leather armor, he looked even more heroic and extraordinary, with a bit of ranger temperament. It's a pity that the villagers outside wouldn't look at him that way. A handsome Witcher is a false proposition, and you can't prove whether it exists. Moreover, even if there is, he is still a Witcher. All the Witchers get is endless abuse and hatred. This is not built overnight, but under the guidance of some people with ulterior motives, it has lasted for 100 years to become what it is now. Facts have once again proved that the truth can never reach half of the popularity of lies, because humans are born to lie. The Witcher was so happy that he even picked up the sword in front of the mirror and gestured, admiring the way he looked in leather armor. Shenyan heard the sound of horse hooves coming from outside the door. He raised his eyebrows and smiled evilly. He performed a little trick to make the Witcher's excellent hearing ineffective for a while. Then, the door of the hall was pushed open, and a strong old man with white hair and beard walked in. When he saw Geralt, he was still a little happy, but when he glanced at the empty bottles on the ground and the most important bottle of East, his face changed. "I'll put the first chapter here first, and come back to make up the rest in the evening. Today, my friends are going home and have a dinner party." I also saw a reader saying that the title of the book was not very suitable. Actually, I feel the same way, but I'm not sure whether to change it. Why don't you give me some suggestions? Chapter 61, Conversation with Vesemir. At this time, Geralt had not noticed the old man standing in front of the door because of the magician's trick. Shenyan bowed slightly to Vesemir, which was considered a simple greeting. The old man smiled a little, but it was very stiff. It can be seen that he didn't use the facial muscles used for smiling very often, but people can still feel his kindness. But he was not so friendly to Geralt. "Geralt." Vesemir's full-bodied voice rang in the hall. He didn't care why the dilapidated Kaer Morhen would become the glorious appearance in his memory again. He just wanted to figure out what Geralt did to his wine collection. In front of the mirror, "I'm not sure if I should use this word." The Witcher, who was posing coquettishly, froze all over. He turned around immediately. His expressionless look might be very intimidating to strangers, but in the eyes of Vesemir, who watched him grow up, it was obvious that he was guilty. The old man walked up to him and poked his chest. "Is this how you treat me? You haven't been back for several years, and as soon as you came back you drank up all my wine? You even took the bottle of East. I couldn't bear to drink it." Geralt stepped back repeatedly after being poked by him. He gave the mage a look for help, and Shenyan responded with a helpless smile, then looked away. He only drank that small glass of East, and all the other wine was drunk by Geralt alone, and he also repaired the castle, so he shouldn't be blamed together with Geralt. Vesemir: "What, have you finally figured out how to fool an old man like me with that clever mouth of yours?" "No." "What do you mean by no? You were going to get rid of me with just one word?" "I didn't." "You didn't drink?" "If not, who else?" "Then who?" "Wait." Geralt finally found time to finish his words. While Vesemir was taking a breath, he quickly said, "I drank it, but didn't you see what Kaer Morhen looked like?" Vesemir mercilessly exposed him. "Come on, if you have the ability, I'll let you use your real name, Mr. Geralt Roger Eric Duhaut Bellegarde, am I right?" Geralt, whose dark history was exposed, looked a little angry and embarrassed. He quickly took off his leather armor and stuffed it to Vesemir. Okay, I know I was wrong. This leather armor will be given to you as compensation." Unexpectedly, the old man shook his head. He stuffed the leather armor back to Geralt, pointing to the mess in the hall and the mop and bucket in the corner. He didn't say anything, but Geralt knew what he wanted him to do. The Witcher mumbled something, but still went to work honestly. Vesemir and Shenyan were left sitting in the hall. The old man stretched out his hand to the black-robed wizard, and Shenyan, who shook hands with him, could feel the calluses on his palm and fingers and the still strong strength. Vesemir showed his stiff smile again and introduced himself. "Vesemir, mentor of the Wolf School." "Shenyan, I'm just a wandering wizard." "I don't think a wandering wizard can use this kind of magic." "Kaer Morhen looks exactly like I remember it, before it was breached." Vesemir pointed to the murals on the ceiling, nostalgia in his eyes. "The place has been restored exactly. Your magic is powerful." Shenyan accepted it calmly. Vesemir continued, "But I don't know why you are hanging out with that guy, Mr. He. A powerful wizard like you can enter and leave the king's courts, and you will be their most distinguished guest." The wizard laughed, and the smile was fleeting. "I'm not interested in this. But isn't that what you wizards like to do most? Perhaps second only to using magic to create dangerous creatures." "Maybe most wizards are aiming here, but it has nothing to do with me. As I said, I'm just a wandering wizard." "Aren't wanderers and wanderers a perfect match?" The wizard continued. "I know what you are worried about, Mr. Vesemir, but I really have no ill intentions, you can rest assured." "Geralt is my friend." The old man glanced at him. At this moment, he might just be a father worried about his son. "I hope so, sir. I hope you can forgive my offense." "It's nothing. I've heard worse." The wizard laughed, and his answer buffered the somewhat stiff atmosphere. "Well, speaking of which, do you mind telling me about what Geralt has done this past year?" Shenyan blinked and said, "Ah, I've only known him for a few months. We spent the winter in Novigrad, and well, I'm not sure if I should say it. He used the money to fool around with those girls again, right?" "Well, maybe not just girls." Vesemir's eyes twitched, and he supported his face with his right hand. "I've told him many times not to spend money on them. He's 54 years old. Why is he still like a playboy? Not only that, he also killed a lot of water ghosts." Shenyan tried to say something for Geralt. The old man's words were precise and sharp, and he made no secret of it. "Yes, even the worst Witcher apprentice can pick up a sword and kill a dozen water ghosts. If he can't even do this, he might as well stay in the castle and clean for me." Geralt, who was inexplicably scolded, yelled with a mop, "Hey, what did I do again?" Vesemir yelled back, "You know it yourself." "Well, he actually did something very heroic. I think it was a just act." Hearing this, the old man finally sighed helplessly. "I know what he did. What he did in Novigrad even spread to Oxenfurt. I killed a bat-winged demon there, and when I returned to the city, I heard about the great things a white-haired Witcher did in Novigrad. His reputation may now be so famous that everyone in Skellige knows him." TSK. Do you know how the newspapers in Oxenfurt describe him? They call him the white-haired knight. What a weird name. Vesemir sneered mercilessly. Shenyan knew why he was so angry. The dispute between the Gregory family and the city council was enough to kill a demon hunter. After all, no matter how powerful he was just a demon hunter, and demon hunters could never resist the power of money. There were countless people willing to sacrifice their lives for a little gold. What was a demon hunter? He did a chivalrous thing. Mr. Vesemir, there are many powerful people in this world, but few are willing to use their power to help others. Geralt is one of the few. This is also what I worry about him most. The old man lowered his voice and said slowly, "I have seen too many demon hunters who lost their lives because of their kindness." The wizard smiled mysteriously. He had something to say. 5 more chapters tomorrow. Please vote. By the way, if you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelist. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We are waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 62 Greengrass Trial. What do you think of the Trial of Grasses? The abrupt words of the wizard made the old man stunned for a moment, but he quickly came back to his senses and narrowed his eyes. "I don't have any special opinions." "Why do you ask?" "Because I want to know how a Witcher mentor thinks of such a necessary but extremely cruel ritual with a very high mortality rate." Vesemir fell silent. He was very familiar with the Trial of Grasses, the kind of familiarity that he didn't want to recall. The complete process of the Trial of Grasses is as follows. After the young Witcher apprentice takes a special alchemical decoction called grass, the body and physiological structure will undergo very special and serious changes. Grass affects the nervous system, so a powerful wizard or master-level alchemist must be present to control the entire process. The trial will produce a lightning-fast chain reaction, and ordinary people simply don't have enough reaction speed to cope with the various changes that occur in the apprentices during this process. Moreover, this is an extremely painful process. The survival rate of the Trial of Grasses is usually only 3 in 10, and even in Kaer Morhen in its heyday, it was only 40%, which is already the highest success rate. The few apprentices who survived also had to undergo mutation transformation, which was also not an easy process. The Trial of Grass would last about 7 days, after which they would undergo mutation, and only then would they be considered to have truly completed this stage. But what if the Trial of Grass failed? Believe me, even the strongest people would not want to see that scene. In Vesemir's long life, he had seen many children die miserably because they could not survive. Their bodies would twist and swell, and they would scream in extreme pain. The lightest way to die would be to explode into a pool of minced meat, and the more serious ones would lose consciousness and become a mass of constantly twisting rotten meat. I don't want to think about it again, Vesemir whispered. He raised his head. A light flashed in his eyes, like lightning, striking the wizard's face. Listen, I can probably guess what you want to do, wizard. If you plan to train new demon hunters as your soldiers, then someone will die here today. The wizard's smile disappeared. He said seriously and sincerely, I don't have such an idea. Of course, it is reasonable for you not to believe me. Vesemir shook his head and said, just pretend you're not, wizard. But Alzu himself can't achieve half of the success rate. Why do you think you can do better than him? Just try it. We don't have any new apprentices. Who said no? The wizard asked back. He pointed outside the door and said, isn't there a horse? What? Vesemir even thought he had heard it wrong. He stood up, trying to understand what the wizard had just said. I said, there's a horse over there, the wizard repeated, and the certainty in his words made Vesemir almost think that he was not talking about a horse, but a well-trained witcher apprentice. Vesemir held his forehead and suddenly felt a little tired. Even if you are really crazy enough to use a horse for the trial of green grass, how do you get the raw materials? We haven't done this for many years, and we have no material reserves. Geralt, who had been eavesdropping for a long time, came over and said, yes, you need the spinal fluid of a fork-tailed dragon, the venom glands of a flying lion, the tongue of an albino vampire banshee, yam, plantain and datura root. We may only have the last 3 in reserve. The wizard spread his hands. Then let's go find them. Vesemir raised his right hand and waved it down vigorously. No, number. Mr. He, there is no us here. There is only you. If you plan to conduct this damn experiment yourself, just try it yourself. I don't want to see that scene again, even if you want to use it on a horse. After that, he left. Geralt fiddled with the mop in his hand carelessly, stroking the rough wooden handle. He said, forgive the old man, he can't watch it again. In fact, the scene is really horrifying. Shenyan stood there with his hands behind his back. He looked up at the mural on the ceiling of Kaer Morhen. There was a black-haired wizard with a goatee occupying most of the mural. His image was portrayed very vividly, giving people a powerful and mysterious feeling. The wizard suddenly asked, do you want to see it? The demon hunter was a little stunned. He said, what to see? The trial of grass. Geralt smiled bitterly. Although he had understood the character of his mysterious mage companion these days, it didn't mean that he could understand it. In his opinion, Shenyan was indeed much better than other mages. He was a good person, but he was still willful and arrogant like other mages. He often had irrelevant ideas in his mind, but he had enough action to put these ideas into practice. Recreating the trial of grass might just be a short-lived crazy idea of his. Trust me, Geralt, you won't regret it. Shenyan smiled, and waved to the outside of the door. Geralt's old horse flew in, neighing uncomfortably in the air. Shenyan cast a spell to stun it, and his mental power covered the surroundings. He easily found yam, long-leaved plantain and mandrake root in the basement of the castle. Okay, you are still short of 3 other materials. What are you going to use instead? Geralt spread his hands helplessly. He looked at his poor old horse lying on the ground and was not worried. Well, this. Shenyan reached into the air, and most of his right hand disappeared, as if it suddenly stretched into another space. The mage rummaged inside and took out a heavy black box. Bang! He threw the box on the ground, and Shenyan kicked it open. It was full of bottles and jars. The wolf head pendant on Geralt's chest suddenly began to vibrate wildly. He frowned and asked, what are these? Substitutes. He stretched out his hand and began to pick out the dozens of bottles and jars. Geralt watched him take out a jar marked Red Dragon. Inside was a heart that was still beating. After the mage took the jar out of the box, it expanded rapidly. Shenyan placed it on the long table. Geralt stared at the heart. It was dark red and very large. Geralt estimated that it was at least half a meter long. Shenyan took out another jar. This time, Geralt didn't see the label on it. He only knew that it was a bottle of golden liquid. Shenyan squatted on the ground, and the corner of his black robe dragged on the ground. He was a germaphobe and didn't seem to care at this time. He just stared at the jars in the box in a daze. After a while, he reached out and took out a small black bottle. This time, Geralt clearly saw the label, Shadow Essence. Chapter 63 Green Grass Trial. Good. The preparations are almost done. The wizard snapped his fingers, and a long table from the other end of the hall flew over. He took out the heart and took out a bunch of experimental instruments as before, explaining to Geralt, "Although I don't know the properties of those materials, all mutation and transformation rituals seem the same to me, nothing more than destruction and repair." Geralt crossed his arms and watched him busy. The Witcher suddenly had a premonition that he would witness a miracle, but he didn't know whether it was good or bad. Shenyan patted the huge heart on the table. It was even dripping with blood, and the blood dripped on the wood and table with a hissing sound. He took out a huge basin from the experimental equipment beside him, which was large enough to hold the giant heart, and put the heart in. Then he poured the golden liquid on it, and the heart was beating without any abnormality, until he added the bottle of shadow essence. A sound like thunder exploded in the hall. The color of the heart was gradually changing from deep red to gold and black. The magic power floated in the hands of the wizard, controlling this dangerous mutation. He looked at the heart with great concentration, and even fine beads of sweat appeared on his forehead. The sound of the heartbeat became louder and louder. Obviously, there were no blood vessels to circulate blood to it, but it was beating continuously and the sound was getting louder and louder. The heart was still changing between gold and black. Shenyan suddenly shouted, "Geralt, add yam." The Witcher hurriedly picked up the yam, peeled off its roots, and threw it into the pot. As soon as its green roots entered, they were crushed into powder by the black magic power in the hands of the wizard, and turned into a fine black powder, covering the heart. Shenyan carefully controlled the powder and engraved 12 strengthening spells on the heart. He looked at Geralt again. This time, without him saying anything, Geralt picked up the long-leaf plantain and the mandrake root. The Witcher asked, "Which one do you want?" Shenyan's voice was almost roaring. "All." Geralt did as he was told. As the two materials entered, he clenched his fists, his nails pierced into his palms, and drops of blood flowed out, which were evaporated by magic in the next second. Shenyan controlled the two materials to carve on the heart in the same way. After a burst of light, the heartbeat suddenly stopped. Its color no longer changed, and it was still deep red. Geralt couldn't understand the twisted spells at all. He only knew that the pendant on his chest was about to be broken. Geralt pulled off the pendant and threw it hard to the other side of the hall, at least to keep it away from here, at least a little bit. Shenyan exhaled tiredly. He hadn't done such a dangerous job that required constant concentration for a long time, but the sense of accomplishment after success was incomparable. He smiled and said, "Please, Geralt, help me find a bottle marked with red dragon blood in the second row of boxes." "Okay." While the Witcher was looking for the bottle, he used magic to lift the horse onto another long table and fixed it tightly with black magic straps. He took out a syringe from the pile of instruments, took the bottle of red dragon blood handed over by Geralt, injected it, and then pierced the buttocks with a needle. He laughed loudly, and as Geralt's horse woke up and cried in pain, he waved his left hand and the heart floated over. It exuded strong magical fluctuations, so strong that you could see the golden and black light radiating alternately on it with the naked eye. Shenyan patted the horse's head and said apologetically, "I'm sorry, it will be a bit painful next. Why don't you sleep a little longer?" So the horse fell asleep. Shenyan turned his head and said to Geralt, "You may need to stand further away. You don't want the shirt you just changed to be stained with blood again." Geralt immediately retreated to a heavy pillar. Shenyan closed his eyes, took 3 deep breaths, and then opened his eyes. The whole person had completely calmed down. His magic power was squandered quickly as if it was free of money. A full 15 low-level strengthening spells were thrown on the horse. Its body became huge in a crackling sound, almost catching up with the pterodactyl that Geralt killed in the morning. The table was also crushed by it, but the magic bands were still binding it. The mage walked forward, his right hand was palmed, and a thin layer of black magic was hung on it. The high-speed vibration made a sound that made Geralt feel a little palpitating. The buzzing sound made him have no doubt that this layer of magic blade could cut through his pterodactyl leather armor in an instant. The mage raised the sharp blade and cut open the horse's chest in one go. A large amount of blood gushed out. Its life was obviously draining away quickly, but it was still in its sleep and did not wake up. Shenyan patiently watched its blood flow out, and only started to move after the entire ground was covered with blood. He first pressed the needle and pushed it. The dragon blood was injected into the dying body of the horse, bringing it a little vitality. Then, the horse's original blood began to boil, and changed on the ground by itself, forming a circle, surrounding the mage and the horse. Shenyan waved his hand, and the huge heart now became just enough to fit into the horse's body. He did not choose to replace it, but put it in directly. As soon as the heart entered, it turned into a stream of light and disappeared. The horse's chest that had been cut open was instantly restored. A huge amount of magic power began to flow in its body. The black bandages began to break bit by bit. In an instant, it opened its eyes and stood up. 2 hot air currents spurted out of its nose, and 2 scarlet lights lit up in its eyes, but it still stood there quietly without any excessive movements. The mage stroked its head and whispered, "Be smaller." "Okay, buddy, you are a little too big now." It seemed to understand what the mage said, and changed back to its previous size, standing quietly in the hall. Geralt still had no expression on his face, or rather, he was so shocked that he forgot what expression to make. The Witcher came over tremblingly, touched his horse, felt the flow of magic and the strong muscles that were completely different from before, and suddenly a bright smile broke out on his face. Combined with his actions at this time, it was hard not to suspect that he was a pervert. Shenyan turned his head and shouted to the corridor at the other end of the hall, "You can come out now, Mr. Vesemir. How do you feel?" The old man walked out of the shadows. He looked at the horse, also expressionless, but with an abnormal blush on his face. Chapter 64 A dragon that looks like a horse. If Vesemir were to be honest, he would not deny that he did want to restore Kaer Morhen to its former glory. For an old man who had personally experienced the most glorious era of the Witchers, this was what he thought about day and night, but it was also something that could not be achieved. During that massacre, Kaer Morhen, the largest gathering place for Witchers in the world and the former headquarters of the Witcher cult, was breached. Apprentices and Witchers all died, and only one survived, Vesemir, and he is now the oldest Witcher in the world. It took only 100 years for the Witchers to go from glory to desolation. They went from being the protectors of mankind to mutant bastards that everyone hated. Vesemir had no doubt that if all the monsters in the world disappeared one day, the next to suffer would be the Witchers. Did he want to restore the former glory? Of course, he wanted to do it in his dreams, but he only dared to think about it in his dreams. There were only 4 remaining Wolf School Witchers, and they did not know any wizards to help them with the trial of green grass. Not to mention those hard-to-obtain materials, and the biggest difficulty, the apprentices. Even if they could completely replicate the trial of grass, with a success rate of 40% at best, only 4 out of 10 apprentices would succeed. In this era, who would be willing to let their children become Witchers? No one. So it was just a dream for Kaer Morhen to return to its glory days, and this dream came true today. First, the dilapidated castle was restored to its original state, and then the wizard showed Vesemir another completely different trial of grass. Vesemir dared to guarantee that this was definitely 100 times stronger than the trial of grass, and the materials he used were something the old Witcher had never even heard of. Vesemir looked at the horse with complicated eyes, and he said, "So, is this what you want to show me?" Almost. Shenyan nodded, and he began to explain to Vesemir, "I used the heart of a red dragon. This pure dragon heart was preserved by me at the moment it was taken out. Then I used 2 completely different powerful materials, unicorn blood and shadow essence, to engrave strengthening spells on the heart. The resulting magical impact can turn this heart into a never-ending source of magic, and the red dragon heart itself can produce a lot of magic. There's nothing much to say about bleeding it. I used many low-level strengthening spells on it so that it could withstand this heart. The strength of its bones and flesh is actually no different from that of a real dragon. The last step is bleeding. Let its original blood serve as a base to form a circle on the ground, and then infuse the dragon blood and put it into the heart using alchemical techniques. The horse standing in front of you now, you can call it whatever you want, but it actually has nothing to do with a horse. This is a dragon that looks like a horse." Vesemir walked forward, pulled Geralt away from the horse, carefully observed the horse's strong muscles, felt the powerful magic flowing in its body, and did not speak for a long time. Geralt said dissatisfiedly, "Hey, this is my horse, old man, my horse." "Really? What do you call it?" "Carrot." Vesemir looked at him unhappily. "It's okay if you call every horse this, but this one, look at it, such a horse, no, a dragon, a miracle. You want to call it Carrot? What else?" "Ask it, see if it is willing." Geralt walked forward and called softly, "Carrot." Carrot looked at him, ignored him, lowered his head and rubbed the old man's hand, and Geralt realized at this time that Vesemir had taken a carrot in his hand and was about to feed it to Carrot. Geralt suddenly fell silent. Vesemir said, "You can get another horse tomorrow." "I'll leave it in the castle," Geralt half-jokingly said. "Why, are you still planning to train it?" Vesemir didn't say anything, and Geralt's expression became strange. "You can't train it, right?" Vesemir sneered twice, led the dragon horse out of the gate, touched its head affectionately, and even hummed a song. Geralt watched the old man go away, a smile on his face. He looked at the tired wizard, and said sincerely, "Thank you for letting this old man have something to do." Shenyan waved his hand. "Don't say that, I'm also very interested in this matter." The next morning, Geralt and Shenyan set off again. Vesemir stayed in Kaer Morhen. He planned to spend a year teaching the dragon horse how to deal with various dangerous monsters. What Shenyan didn't tell him was that the intelligence of the dragon horse would actually evolve slowly, and even some strange things would happen. Vesemir might wake up one day and find the dragon horse in the courtyard greeting him good morning. He thought about this scene and told Geralt about it. He led the horse in front of the wizard. Geralt, who was originally unhappy, laughed at this time. They came to the nearest town. Geralt spent a small amount of money to buy a chestnut mare, which was gentle and strong. He patted the beast's head with satisfaction and said, "I want to call you Carrot." "Do you really call every horse you give at least Carrot?" "Yes." "Is there any problem?" The wizard was silent for a while, which was rare. He didn't know whether the witcher really didn't feel the problem or what. In short, he decided to skip this topic. "Tell me, how did you recruit apprentices in the past?" They rode their horses and moved slowly along the path in the morning sun. Geralt said, "There are probably three types. The first is orphans who can't survive on their own. Sometimes, they are brought back by some witchers. The second is the law of surprise. This is a customary law, as old as the history of mankind. People who save others can ask for rewards from the rescued according to the law of surprise, asking for the first thing the rescued sees when they return home, or something that the rescued doesn't know but already has, usually a child obtained when the rescued leaves home. Such a child is called an accidental child. In the past, many accidental children were taken to Kaer Morhen, where they were raised and trained to become witchers. As for the third type, it's rare, but it's not non-existent. Geralt was silent for a while, and it was obvious that he didn't want to talk about the third type. Some parents, their children have been sick before they are born because they are too close to some source of magic, or cursed, or because they can't afford to raise them. In the past, they would send their children to Kaer Morhen. Now, I'm not sure, they might just secretly kill those children or throw them away. This kind of thing is not uncommon. Even if the local lord orders it, there will still be people carrying a bag out in the middle of the night. It seems that there is still a long way to go before Kaer Morhen can be truly revived. Geralt, Shenyan sighed. He said, "Fortunately, we can all live a long time." The next two updates will come soon. In addition, because I got the time wrong, I will continue to update 5 times tomorrow. I update twice a day on Monday, Wednesday and Friday. Why did I update 5 times today? Forget it. Chapter 65 A Prophecy. He has white hair and 2 swords on his back. He came from the north and swept down. Like a whirlwind, he saw countless dirty things on the road, but he did not let them taint his heart. He killed innocent people in Novigrad, but that was not his intention. He is a kind person, a special witcher. A bard stood on the side of the road. There was a wooden box under his feet and a bowl next to him, which contained many crowns. He was standing on it and telling a story passionately. The poet wore a flamboyant white feather hat with some stains. He was wearing a dark red uniform, and the whole person looked like a colorful rooster. Many people gathered around him, listening to his story. and even a few girls handed him flowers in their hands, just to let him tell more stories about the white-haired knight. It can be seen that they liked it very much. Two travelers squeezed through the crowd. They hurried past, and one of them with a black hood did not even dare to turn his head. "Let me go," the Witcher groaned in a low voice. "You're quite popular." The black-robed wizard laughed at his companion. The Witcher now wore a black hood to cover his white hair, and even his two swords were no longer on his back, but on both sides of the horse. It had been about a month since they left Kaer Morhen. Along the way, Geralt had been harassed enough. Perhaps it could be called a happy trouble. He didn't get the disgusting, contemptuous or even hateful looks he had received before, nor was he pointed at and scolded in the tavern. On the contrary, every time he arrived in a new town, those who recognized him would even give him wreaths, and some girls would even give him shy kisses. Geralt admitted that it was indeed very enjoyable at the time, but it was not good at all when he thought about it afterwards. He complained to Shenyan in the room of the hotel. "How can I go out and take commissions like this? I don't know which bastard gave me this nickname. Now everyone calls me the White-Haired Knight. It's really weird." "Isn't it nice to hear?" "It's nice to hear." "No, it's not a question of whether it's nice to hear or not. Since it's nice to hear, why do you have such a strong reaction to this nickname? Are you shy about it?" The demon hunter fell silent again. He hated the wizard's sharp tongue very much. He could always hit the dark thoughts in the demon hunter's heart, and he couldn't refute it. "If I had to describe it in one sentence, it would be, obviously very angry, but couldn't find any reason to refute." Geralt sighed and tried to change the subject. "So, why did you drag me out here?" "To find a poor child." The mage's answer was beyond his expectations. Before he could speak, Shenyan continued, "I won't hide it from you, Geralt. Besides, I believe you can see it. The material used for that horse is not from this world, and I am not from this world. It can even be said that I will leave soon." Geralt seemed to have expected it. Shenyan had never thought of hiding this since they first met, so he had been mentally prepared. "But I have a habit. I must finish things, such as the trial of grass." "Stop, stop." Geralt couldn't help but interrupt him. The Witcher asked in confusion, "I'm not worried about the trial of grass, but where are you going to find a child?" "We are not those kidnappers, and I believe you will not just find a child on the street and take him back." Shenyan rolled his eyes. "Of course I won't. Who do you think I am? I used a small prophecy spell last night, that's all. We just need to go all the way south." "I have never believed in prophecies." "I don't believe it much either, but considering that this prophecy was made by myself, I think it's better for you to believe it." "Really?" Geralt became interested. "Do you mind talking about it? Or is this prophecy the type that will not come true once it is said?" Hearing this, Shenyan looked at him strangely. "What kind of prophets have you met before? Where is there such a rule?" "Forget it. Listen carefully." A strange atmosphere began to spread in the hotel room. Geralt felt a shiver on his back. His hair stood up, and he saw the candle on the table next to him floating slowly. The wizard's eyes turned dark. He opened his mouth and let out a silent scream. Geralt heard him speak a language that was more like noise than language, and the magical thing was that Geralt could understand it. He said, "In the dark night, the white wolf will meet the young black wolf. They will go through the storm and cross the ocean. They will rebuild their former glory, and they will search the whole world for a swallow. The black wolf will be dying, even on the verge of death." After a shiver, Geralt touched his nose with some discomfort, and he was surprised to find that he had a nosebleed. Shenyan looked at the blood on his hands and explained, "That is the necessary price to hear the prophecy." "What language did you just speak?" The wizard looked at him quietly. "Are you sure you really want to know? There is a price to pay for learning this language." "Forget it. Just pretend I didn't ask." The demon hunter gave up decisively. He wiped the blood from his nose and asked vaguely, "So, how long will this situation last?" "It depends on your physique." "Well, you should be able to recover tonight. In addition, my personal suggestion is that you'd better write down the prophecy, but it's best not to keep it in your mind all the time. Just think of it as think of it as an hourglass." Well, this metaphor is very appropriate, whether you pay attention to it or not. It is there, and it will pass quietly. As time goes by, It will eventually come. The demon hunter touched his arms somewhat uncomfortably and said, "Okay, you make me creepy. This is exactly what I want. If I don't leave you with some impression, I'm really afraid that you will forget this in love and flowers or other places. In your heart, am I such a person? I've seen with my own eyes that for every 10 crowns you earn, you spend 6 on those girls. I have no doubt that if you had a choice, you would even go without food." Geralt's face was a little embarrassed, and he made his last struggle. "Well, that was last year." "Ha, let's wait and see," the wizard said with a smile. Chapter 66 Livia. It took them 3 months to travel all the way south to Rivia. This is a small kingdom in the north, and it is also Geralt's full name, the Rivia in Geralt of Rivia. It is located in Dal Angra, close to the Mahakam Mountains, and has a considerable advantage in trade. There are many excellent workshops and blacksmiths in Rivia, and the weapons and other goods produced are widely praised for their high quality and exquisite craftsmanship. The accent of the people of Rivia is very recognizable, and they are also greatly discriminated against abroad. Until now, there is still a saying that Rivians are all thieves. Geralt's eyes moved away from the flag with 3 red prisms on a white background hanging on the city gate. He didn't have any special feelings about this country. The reason why he called himself Geralt of Rivia was because Vesemir felt that the name he gave himself was too exaggerated and stupid at the time, so he drew the prefix of Rivia by lot. He had never been to this place before, but it was no different from other towns he had seen before. It was even far inferior. After all, it was just a small country, but at least there is a stone brick floor, and the people coming and going all look good. Looking good means they are living a good life, which also means there are no commissions to take. "This is it," the black-robed wizard muttered to himself. This was the first time he applied the prophecy to reality, so he was a little excited. "So what should we do now?" asked the Witcher. "Nothing." "Nothing?" "Yes. There is no need to do anything deliberately. Just let it go, Geralt. Do whatever you want. Go and play with those girls. Go to the casino. Or you finally remember that you are the water ghost slayer and want to kill some water ghosts to relieve your anger. Just stay here for a while. I would rather you call me the White-Headed Knight than call me that damn nickname." Okay, White-Headed Knight, go and do your thing. I'm going to stroll around here." The wizard quickly sent him away, and he stayed where he was, slowly disappearing in a gust of breeze. Damn water ghost slayer. Damn white-haired knight. It's really a hell. Damn, which bastard came up with this name? I'm going to hang him on a flagpole and whip him until he faints. The Witcher rode his new carrot and looked for a stable in the city. To his disappointment, there was no public stable like in Novigrad, which meant he had to find an inn and let those damn profiteers and innkeepers take some crowns out of his pocket. Alas, the Witcher sighed. If this continued, he might have to kill water ghosts every day again. In fact, this was not something to be ashamed of. Most Witchers were like this, rolling in sewers or gutters all day, killing a few water ghosts to earn some crowns. This was not a high-end profession. After all, there were only a few Witchers like Geralt who were capable of hunting dragons. Moreover, even for him, he still had to kill some water ghosts. He picked a random inn on the street, got off the horse, tied the stable outside the door, and went in. The owner was a young man with a mustache, which was rare. His mustache was not even fully formed. The Witcher guessed that he grew a mustache to make himself look more mature. Most of the people working in the inn business were middle-aged people who were as cunning as home. Geralt had traveled around the world for many years and he agreed that all innkeepers were profiteers. Therefore, even though the owner of this inn was relatively young, he still did not let down his guard. Open a room, one night, bring some food, and the chestnut mare outside the door. Take good care of her. Geralt's hoarse voice sounded beside the bar. He threw out 30 crowns, which was a relatively low price, but it was definitely enough for the owner to make back his money. As he expected, the young man was not thick-skinned enough to let them lie like the middle-aged man and cheat him out of his money. The mustache quickly collected the money, pointed out the room for him, and hurried to the kitchen to start working. Geralt found a seat in the corner and sat down. He put his 2 swords on the table and stretched his stiff shoulders. After a long journey, he really wanted to eat something hot. While waiting for the meal, he caught a glimpse of a woman sitting in the corner on the other side. She had red hair and looked young. She covered her face with her hands, and her exposed arms were covered with bruises. Her shoulders were shaking, and she seemed to be crying. There were 2 bottles of wine on her table. Geralt began to speculate, which was a little hobby of his. Did your husband beat you? No, it doesn't seem like it. You are too young. You got married so young. Unless your parents are all bastards, but this possibility is not ruled out. The clothes are nice, and your family should be well off. If it wasn't your husband who beat you, then it was your father, or a vicious stepmother. Family. He sighed silently until the girl let go of her hand. Geralt's pupils shrank into a line in an instant. There was a long scar on the girl's face, very new, and not even completely scabbed. He could even see a small part of pink flesh. Now, things are getting interesting. Geralt squinted and looked away. He didn't want to offend the girl, and at this moment, his food was served. The mustached young man brought him a plate of mashed potatoes and boiled beans, as well as a bowl of broth, which was quite affordable. The Witcher said thank you softly, and the young man smiled a little at a loss. He walked to the girl's table and spoke awkwardly. Vilya, if it really doesn't work, you can come back. You don't have to. No, brother. The girl called Vilya sniffed and interrupted her brother. There was still a hint of tears in her voice, but her expression was very determined. I won't leave there unless they kill me. Her brother touched the scar on her face distressedly. Geralt couldn't see his face, but his low voice was also trembling a little. How dare they do this to you? God damn it. Gods. Vilja comforted her brother instead. No, they may have bullied me, but this scar has nothing to do with them. Brother, I'm grown up. Don't worry too much about me. I can take care of myself. After that, she showed a strong smile, patted her brother's arm, and then left, leaving her brother and Geralt, who was eating mashed potatoes, calmly. Please vote. I will continue to update 5 more chapters tomorrow. I'm so tired. Chapter 67. I believe in God. Dismally, Vilja went out. She had to get to the college before 2 p.m., otherwise she would miss Professor Phil's history class. He never waited for late students. Moreover, if you were late, you would have to stand outside the classroom to listen to the class. Many students had complained about him, but they were all scolded back by the old man. The principal didn't care much about him. After all, he was the only one in the whole school who had studied at Oxford University when he was young. Vilja walked on the street empty-handed. She had no books to use now. Those people tore up Vilja's books after class and said some very unpleasant words to her. Vilja didn't take it seriously. As the daughter of a businessman, she was used to being bullied in the college. Thinking of this, she touched the scar on her face, which spread from the left cheek to the right cheek and often hurt. But she had begun to gradually become familiar with the scar, just like gradually becoming familiar with being bullied. The girl didn't lower her head. She walked on the street with the scar on her head. Geralt ate beans intermittently. He had finished the mashed potatoes and the bowl of broth, but he never liked beans. However, he had to eat them since he had spent his own money. The innkeeper had returned to the bar and was wiping his glasses. Geralt actually doubted whether anyone would come here at night. Those popular inns and bars would invite a dozen girls in short skirts to the store. Many people criticized them, thinking that this was the beginning of a corruption. But in front of money, everything is false. Excuse me, he said, give me a bottle of Vizima stout. The young man was troubled when he heard this. Sir, we don't have the wine you want here. We only have our own brewed beer. Do you want it? Geralt said indifferently. Okay, how much is it? 8 crowns. Geralt paused as he was about to pay. He was a little surprised at the cheap price, but he would drink it if he didn't drink it. He said, then give me another bottle. He took out 16 crowns and placed them in a row on the table, waiting for the young man to bring him the wine. The Witcher didn't think he could do anything in this city. The people here didn't seem to have any problems with monsters. He couldn't get commissions to kill monsters, so he could only take commissions to remove curses. This kind of commission was what Geralt hated the most. Most of them took a long time, and he had to be careful at every step. It was not like killing water ghosts. Why did I think of killing water ghosts again? The Witcher was a little dazed. He began to wonder if it was because he killed too many water ghosts. Just then, the young man came over and interrupted his thoughts. handing him 2 bottles of wine, orange-yellow ale in heavy glass bottles. Geralt observed for a while, uncorked and smelled it, and a smile appeared at the corner of his mouth under his hood. 8 crowns to buy such wine? It was really a good deal. He poured out the first cup, drank it in one gulp, wiped the white foam from the corner of his mouth, and simply took the bottle and started drinking. In this way, he sat there for an afternoon and drank all the young man's stock. These wines are still wines no matter how low the alcohol content is. Geralt can still remember in his somewhat confused mind that he just wanted to taste them at first, just like all drunkards. They all say this to themselves: I'll take a sip, then the second sip, the third sip, endlessly, never stopping. In some ways, drinking is addictive, just like other things. For example, hurting others. We all know that some people, I don't know if I should call them people, can get pleasure from hurting others. Vilja was thrown to the ground hard. Opposite her stood a group of young people. The leader, a blond young man, bent over. He had an ugly pot-cut haircut with bangs covering his eyebrows. His face was covered with freckles and his nose was crooked. He yelled at her, "Didn't I tell you not to come to school anymore, you idiot? Women should stay at home and do what you should do. Look at her, she actually wants to sit in the same classroom with us." There were laughter and ridicule from behind the blond young man, but Vilja was not moved at all. She sat on the muddy road, gathered her skirt, lifted her red hair in front of her forehead, and said calmly, "No, you just think I'm easy to bully. Miss Beth also goes to this school. Why don't you say what you just said to her?" "I bet you don't dare to do that, Jolton." The blond young man called. Jolton's face flushed red. He immediately wanted to teach this ignorant girl a lesson, but was stopped by his companions. His companion gave him a look, and the blond young man's anger was extinguished. He saw a white-haired old man standing behind the girl. He said nothing, but just stood there with a thick book in his hand. "Are you okay?" When they ran away, the old man handed Vilja a hand and pulled her up from the muddy road. Vilja's linen skirt was now covered with mud. The old man's green eyes under his glasses swept over her face and paused. "Did they do it to you?" "No, Professor Phyllis, it has nothing to do with them." Vilja tried her best to keep her demeanor. She didn't want to show any weakness. "Thank you for your help, Professor. I'm going back." She showed a fleeting smile on her face, and then lowered her head and walked away quickly. Professor Phyllis stood behind her, with deep confusion and doubt on his face. He didn't know who would do such a thing, but since the girl didn't want to say it herself, he had no right to insist to the end. The old man shook his head and left the college. Vilja did not go home as she said. After she walked out of the college, she turned left and right and walked into an alley. There stood a tall and thin man with pockmarks on his face and a dagger on his waist. Seeing Vilja coming, he laughed maliciously. "Hey, look who's here." Vilja raised her head, and there was no fear in her blue eyes. "I'm here to get the money." The thin tall man frowned, then relaxed his brows, and he smiled again. "I told you very clearly last time, Miss Vilja, that's the money your father owed us." "I thought the scar on your face should make you remember it." "I've seen my father's account book. He only owed you 500 kroner. After you took it back, you took the extra 100 kroner. I can't ignore his death. But you must return the extra money." The thin tall man's face gradually became impatient. He was about to open his mouth to explain something, but was interrupted by his companion's action. His companion rushed out from the darkness and hit the girl on the back of the head with the wooden stick in his hand, making her faint. "What the hell are you doing?" the thin tall man yelled. "Knock her out, you idiot. Can't you see? She has come here to find us 4 times. Last time, we scratched her face but she didn't give up. How can we give her money? If the boss knows that we are collecting debts behind his back, we will still be alive?" The thin tall man scratched his face after being convinced. "Well, you are right, but what should we do now? She will definitely not give up if she wakes up. Should we run?" "Run?" His companion, a flaxen-haired strong man, laughed, and saliva spurted out of his mouth. He said, "No, carry her to the back room and lock her there. We can save some money this way." The thin tall man shuddered. "No, Rawls, I won't do such a thing. I believe in the goddess Melitli. You do it yourself." Rawls laughed again, nodded, and swung the wooden stick in his hand to smash his head the moment the thin tall man turned his head. Red and white liquid scattered all over the ground, some even splashed onto his face. Rawls scraped his nose with his fingers and laughed, then dragged the unconscious Villia deep into the alley. Chapter 68. Mages are all riddlers. The next morning, Geralt was awakened by the sound of conversation coming from downstairs. The soundproofing here was not very good, but the mattress was soft enough. The Witcher turned over in bed with his upper body naked, but he could not fall asleep again. He simply turned over and put on his clothes to go to the notice board in the city to see if anyone needed a Witcher. Before going downstairs, Geralt walked to the corner and heard the innkeeper, the young man with a mustache, speaking very quickly. "She didn't go home last night. Gentlemen, you must help me. I lost my father and mother. I can't lose my sister again. She is all I have." At the end, his voice even had a crying tone. Geralt heard a man's embarrassed voice. Mallory, I really want to help you, but she just didn't come home for one night." "Are you taking it too seriously?" Another man said. "Yes, Mallory. It's common for girls of her age to go out and have fun with the boys they like. Times have changed. It's not like before when they only meet before getting married." Mallory, the innkeeper, almost cried. No, you don't understand. She always goes home directly after class, but it happened last night." The first man who spoke sighed. "Okay, we'll check it out, and don't worry too much, okay? Well, I mean, nothing will happen to her." With the sound of armor colliding, they left, and Geralt's excellent hearing allowed him to clearly hear the conversation between the two outside the door. "How can we check?" "Check? I don't know how. Didn't you see how he looked? If I don't agree, he'll definitely cry. God, I can't bear to see other people cry. And Mallory is miserable enough, and, to be honest, I also hope that Vilja is okay." They gradually went away, and the Witcher walked down the stairs. He deliberately made footsteps to remind Mallory. Geralt saw Mallory's eyes. He had seen many pairs of such eyes. How many? He couldn't remember, but almost every time, a part of his heart would feel a pain when facing such eyes, and then numbness. "Is there anything to eat?" the Witcher said casually. Mallory's eyes were slightly red, and he nodded. "Yes, sir. What would you like to eat?" "Anything is fine, except your crying face," the Witcher said in his heart. After dinner, Geralt left the inn. He paid for 2 more nights. He wandered around the city with his hood on and his swords on his back, looking for commissions. He focused on the notices, but found nothing. No one needed a Witcher, and it was rare to see such places. He only saw some notices looking for lost dogs or lost and found. Rivia is not a big city. The country is not big, and the capital of the same name is not big either, but at least it has everything. So as he walked around, his eyes involuntarily focused on the shops with cursive signs. Most of them had very ambiguous names, which were quite provocative. The Witcher touched the purse on his waist and gave up the idea of going in to take a look. It was definitely not because he had no money, but because he wanted to change his mind. Just listen to it seriously. Vilja woke up in the dark with a splitting headache. She found that her hands were hung up and a bundle of cloth was stuffed in her mouth, emitting a foul smell. She didn't scream. She tried to move her legs, but felt a tearing pain in her lower body. She realized what was happening, and 2 tears streaked across her dirty face. But other than that, the girl didn't make any other movements. She didn't scream, didn't try to cry, and didn't even make any extra movements. Her eyes were a little swollen and a little painful, and after a while, she could finally see clearly in the dark. There was straw on the ground, no windows, and it was full of darkness. Her 2 hands were hung on the beams, and the house was quiet, as if no one was there. Vilja looked up and found that the rope was thrown very high, and she was very weak now, and there was basically no possibility of escape. The girl waited quietly in the dark. She didn't know who would push the door in, but she would definitely not cry. When Geralt turned the corner, he heard a familiar voice. He looked up. It was Shenyan. He was still wearing the black robe, bargaining with a woman at a street stall, holding a book in his hand. Geralt heard him say, "No, ma'am, this book absolutely cannot cost 70 crowns. You are robbing me," the woman answered firmly. It is 70 crowns. If you want to buy it, you have to give me 70 crowns. Shenyan sighed. He took out the purse from his waist and threw it to her. Count it yourself. The woman stood beside her stall, took out 70 crowns from their bag with a smile on her face, handed the purse back, and said very politely, "Thank you for your patronage, sir, and I wish you a long life." Shenyan smiled twice with a fake smile. He walked towards Geralt as if he had predicted the future, and flipped through the book in his hand. "You have made progress, Geralt. Apart from the smell of alcohol, you don't even smell of makeup. I have turned over a new leaf." The wizard said nothing. He just smiled and shook his head, holding up the book in his hand. "Look what I found." Geralt frowned. He tried hard to distinguish the line of cursive words. "Encyclopedia of Monster Habits? Why did you buy this kind of book? Why don't you just ask me?" The wizard pulled him to sit on a bench by the roadside, and said while flipping through the pages, "No, you have to stay in the city until the prophecy is fulfilled. During this time, I have to do my own thing." "Then how long will I stay?" The wizard shrugged very irresponsibly. "Then I don't know. But when it is completed, you will know clearly." "Do you have to play this trick? Why don't you want to make it clear?" Geralt's complaint made Shenyan raise his head helplessly. He explained, "It's not that I don't want to make it clear, Geralt. It's just that I don't know the specific situation, and I can't directly see what will happen in the future. It's just a prophecy, a one-sided description of something, so I don't like prophecy." Geralt leaned back, looked at the people coming and going, and said, "What are you going to do again?" "Me? You?" "Well," the wizard smiled, and his figure gradually disappeared on the bench, leaving only the demon hunter with wide eyes and his vague words. "You can guess slowly. The update is a bit late. Let's adjust it to earlier tomorrow. I will try to release the remaining 3 chapters around 10 o'clock. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelist. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We are waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 69 Bordeaux Manor. After Shenyan proved that he was fully capable of the green grass trial, what he needed now was a demon hunter apprentice and the materials for the green grass: spinal fluid of a forked dragon, poison glands of a flying lion, tongues of an albino vampire, yam, plantain, and root of mandrake. The latter 3 can be found in the basement of Kaer Morhen, but the first 3 are more difficult to find. The forked dragon is a dragon-like creature, named after the long, pointed protrusion at the end of its tail. If hit by its tail, even an oak shield will be split in half, not to mention the hand holding the shield. Although its name sounds like tableware, the general result of fighting it is not like a dinner feast, and the ending is likely to be death. The flying lion is less described. They have 2 horns on their heads, flesh wings on both sides of their bodies, and lion sideburns. The description is very general, and it doesn't even mention where to find them. The vampire is very detailed, so detailed that Shenyan even thinks that the author of this book has something to do with them. A vampire is a humanoid blood-sucking monster that is agile. It is a creature that appeared after the conjunction of the celestial spheres and an intruder in our world. She looks like a beautiful woman in a cloak, and often appears in ruins. They have pale bloodless skin and dark hair, gloomy and beautiful, but once they attack, they are extremely deadly. They are extremely agile and can emit a dizzying and tinnitus-inducing scream. She usually looks for victims to be lovers, and also become a continuous source of supplies. Vampires are quite rare creatures. They rarely appear in caves and grottos where most monsters often appear, but wander among abandoned villages and ruins with no people. Many vampires live some distance away from people, because they pay great attention to their own safety and like to build nests in places where they will not be attacked. They even have habits. Shenyan closed the book with a strange look on his face. He didn't care who wrote this book, nor did he care how he knew these things. The black-robed wizard now just wanted to find the materials he needed and start experimenting. His curiosity could no longer be suppressed. He had a hunch that he might be able to improve the recipe of green grass by adding something else. Geralt couldn't sit still on the 3rd day after Shenyan left. He had read all the notice boards in the city, But there was no commission for demon hunters. They were all about finding dogs and lost and found. He couldn't really go to the door with 2 swords on his back and introduce himself. "Hello, I'm a demon hunter. Is this your lost dog?" He planned to take a walk outside the city. Like most cities, Rivia's towering walls were surrounded by farmland, and there were several large and small villages nearby. Geralt rode his carriage to the nearest one. The village was neither big nor small. There was a sheepfold at the head of the village, and some chickens were raised in it. Many people passing by looked at the hooded man with vigilant eyes. Geralt was in no mood to pay attention to their looks. He just walked to the notice board to see if he could try his luck. He was lucky. Among the pile of notices such as "My rake is broken and the cart needs to be repaired," a newer one caught his attention. "We need a courageous person, or you are a witcher. That would be best. In short, if you think you can do this job, please come to Bowles Manor quickly." It was very general, neither saying what it was nor what he encountered. And this Bowles Manor, Geralt recalled a manor not far from the city that he had caught a glimpse of when he left the city. It was just a glimpse, but it also left him with a deep impression of the manor. There was no other reason. That place was too desolate. The lawns were unattended, large tracts of farmland were dead, and there was no sign of human habitation. Passers-by were even reluctant to approach that road, and crows were hovering on the red roof of the main building of the manor. Could it be there? The Witcher turned his head and looked at the villagers. He didn't think they would be kind enough to show him the way, so he decided to turn around and go back to find out what was going on. He saw a sign on a small road not far from the manor. Many spiders had woven webs behind the sign. The handwriting was blurred, but he could still recognize it. It was the words "Bowles Manor." The Witcher looked up at the magnificent but desolate and dilapidated manor again. He rode his horse and moved forward slowly. The horse's hooves raised a pile of dust behind him. As soon as he entered, he felt a sense of foreboding lingering in his heart. It was as if he was cursed just by entering this land. With that road as the dividing line, the Witcher found that the ground had even changed color. It was no longer the color of soil, but turned into a charred black. His face under the hood became serious. He continued to move forward, and a voice called him. "Hey, you, stop!" Geralt turned his head on his horse, and a bald old man holding a wooden stick in his hand stopped him. The old man came closer, squinted his eyes, and asked after confirming again and again, "Are you alive?" Geralt nodded. The old man was still worried, so he walked a little closer, and then he felt relieved. He wiped the sweat from his forehead and complained, "Why are you running here for no reason? Leave quickly." "I saw a notice." "Ah, I know, it's a notice from Bowles Manor. Take my advice, young man. You still have a long life. Leave here quickly. 7 people took this commission before you, and they all died. I haven't counted the Bowles family with you yet. All 13 people in their family, young and old, died here." Geralt put down his hood. "I'm a witcher." The old man's stick fell to the ground. He looked at the cat's eyes, closed his eyes and prayed. "That makes sense, a witcher," the old man said. "I'm their housekeeper, Gillette. I've been the only one living here since the Bowles family died. They only have a little daughter who ran away, took the money and put up the notice. It's been more than a year, and not only has the matter not been resolved, but more people have died. You don't look very sad about their death." "Of course, why should I be sad? If I hadn't owed Bordeaux a debt, how could I have gone to be their housekeeper?" Although his treatment was quite good, I did a good job later, so I had no plans to leave. "You're very talkative." The old man rolled his eyes. "I haven't talked to anyone in more than a year." "I finally caught you, this unlucky guy. If I don't talk to you, am I going to talk to your horse after you die?" Chapter 70. The dead are talking. A dark cloud gathered over the manor. Geralt saw many trees. It was spring, but all their leaves had fallen off. A feeling of death filled the entire manor. The old man was still chattering beside him. "I tell you, you still have time to run away now. I don't think the Witcher can do anything about their affairs." Geralt suddenly said, "What is it?" The old man stopped, and he and Geralt looked at the manor not far away and asked, "Are you sure you really want to know?" "I'm a Witcher." Okay, a Witcher. Humphrey, whatever you say. If you don't listen to my advice, I'll just wait to collect your body." The old man continued, "That was a year ago, Bordeaux." He paused, but still said the name. "Master, I bought a magic lantern at an auction in the city. It's very exquisite. At night, it can illuminate half of the sky when placed in the yard. It is said to be something from the elven ruins. He values this thing very much and said that he would present it to the king on the king's birthday." But when the lantern came to the manor, strange things began to happen. First, Al, the lawn caretaker, died. He died in his bed, with shit and urine all over the place, and half of his intestines fell out of his stomach. Master Bordeaux asked us to bury him and gave his family a large sum of money. We told the public that he fell on his head. A lawn caretaker fell on his head and died. Humphrey, he really thought of that. Then there was Nana. She worked in the laundry room. She died a miserable death. I tell you, I've seen many ways of dying, and hers was the most miserable. She also died while sleeping. Her throat was cut open by a pair of scissors. The coroner said her trachea was pulled out. That's not all. Her hands and feet were separated from her body. 2 weeks later, the manor's dog trainer found one of her arms in the grass. It was almost rotten. Only then could we bury her. Then people started dying in droves. I was lucky. I felt something was wrong at the time, so I ran away. Now I live in a house not far from Bordeaux Manor. I can be considered as a gatekeeper for them to prevent anyone who is not smart enough to go in and die again. Geralt listened quietly, and when the old man finished speaking, he asked, "Where is his body?" "Who?" "El, the one who took care of the lawn you mentioned." "I think it's behind the manor, next to the statue of the goddess Melancholy." "Poor El, may you rest in peace." "Where is the lantern?" "How should I know? Master Bordeaux kept it very close to him. When he died, no one knew where it was except him." Geralt nodded, his hand already on the silver sword. The Witcher said softly, "Mr. Gillette, do you smell a smell?" Gillette was confused. "What smell?" "The smell of a corpse." As soon as the Witcher finished speaking, he drew his sword on horseback. A flash of sword light passed by, and the old man's head fell to the ground, but no blood flowed out. His head fell straight to the ground, his eyes still looking at Geralt. A few strands of hair on his bald forehead swayed in the breeze. Although he could no longer speak, he still made a sound from his throat. "What's going on?" Geralt got off his horse, picked up Gillette's head and said to him, "You are dead, don't you understand? Did you kill me?" "No, you died a long time ago." The Witcher turned his head, and he was not shocked when he saw his headless body still standing. He just said calmly, "Well, my figure is still the same." The Witcher turned his head back, and Gillette said, "That thing is really weird. I thought I ran away, but I still died? Then how did I live another year? I mean, I can still eat." Geralt shrugged. It was the first time he had seen such a situation. Gilliado's head sighed. "Please, Witcher, please do me a favor and crush my head and dig a pit to bury me. As for the mess in this place, don't worry about it. Go to the city to find Lena Bordeaux. She will pay you some money. Run quickly while you still have time." The Witcher raised his head and looked at the crows all over the manor. Their scarlet eyes were all staring at the Witcher. He said softly, "I think it's too late." After he finished speaking, the path behind him disappeared in an instant. A ball of fire appeared in Geralt's palm, and Gilliado's head was ignited. He was like a piece of paper, and turned into ashes in an instant. The same was true for his headless body. It stood and turned into a pool of ashes, dancing in the air with the breeze. The demon hunter patted his horse, took off his crossbow and alchemical bomb and hung them on his waist, took out a bottle of evil spirit oil and began to oil his silver sword. There is a mysterious boundary between the world of the dead and the world of the living. For those restless evil spirits, it is easier to cross this boundary than humans. The demon hunter will apply evil spirit oil on the sword before fighting ghosts and all other ghostly evil spirits. It is the most effective of all oils for such evil things. Of course, this oil has little effect on humans and monsters other than evil spirits. After doing this, he took out a bottle of swallow potion and drank it. It is a very common potion that is suitable for use in many occasions and has no side effects. It is very suitable for taking before you know what you are going to face, and it is also suitable for protracted battles. He also took out a bottle of emerald green potion, Thunder, which can strengthen the muscle strength of demon hunters, thereby increasing the power of sword strikes. The demon hunters' potions are all poisonous, and even the mildest ones can easily poison ordinary people. After Geralt drank 2 bottles of potion, his eyes began to sparkle. This was not a good sign, but a proof of the accumulation of toxins. At the same time, black veins began to appear on his face, which looked very scary. The Witcher breathed a sigh of relief. This is not over yet. The evil spirits in this manor are probably very powerful, and he has no way back. He took out a bottle of Mariber Forest. This potion can greatly improve endurance. After drinking this potion, the Witcher can block without getting tired, or cast spells continuously. However, everything has 2 sides. This powerful potion will cause slight spasms, and its toxicity is also very serious. After drinking it, Geralt immediately bent down. He let out a dull roar from his throat. When he raised his head, his forehead was full of blue veins, looking more like a monster than a person. It's really strong. I'm almost numb. I'll go to cook a bowl of noodles and come back to write the last chapter. I haven't eaten yet. Chapter 71. Don't get up if you die. The Witcher's eyes glowed yellow, and he walked lightly on the gravel road leading to the main building of the manor like a cat. If the surrounding lawns and trees were not troubled by this curse, there would be a very nice view. Unfortunately, there is nothing but dead silence now. A few crows flew over and circled around Geralt. He narrowed his eyes, not liking this hint very much. Crows only do this to people who are dying. They are scavengers. The Witcher snorted coldly, ignored them, and continued to move forward. According to Gilioto's words, he went around the back of the manor and found a statue of the goddess Melitli among the dry trees. The statue, which was carved with her as a carefree girl, was full of cracks and even covered with vines. Obviously, this was not something that could be done in a year. The Witcher's nose moved. The toxicity of the potion brought him closer to the level of a monster, so his senses were also enhanced to a certain extent. He could clearly smell the stench coming from under the ground. It seems they didn't bury you deep enough. He made the altar sign, and a powerful telekinesis burst out. With the help of the potion, it was even more powerful. He easily blew away the soil, revealing a corpse underneath. He was already highly rotten, with bits of rotten flesh hanging between his bones. His eyes were gone, leaving only 2 black eye sockets, staring at the sky, with some insects crawling in his wide-open mouth. Geralt made the Igni sign again, and raging flames spurted out of his hands, giving the corpse a fire treatment. The rotten flesh and insects were burned to charcoal. Geralt added a milder alder to shatter them, and then gave himself a ken, then reached out and pulled the corpse up. He didn't look any different, just an ordinary human corpse. Geralt thought so, and then, as if to mock his thoughts, the corpse moved in the next second. L's body was originally lying flat on the ground. Now, his skull turned over, his jaw began to collide, making a crackling sound, and he even raised one hand to try to grab the Witcher's trouser leg. Geralt raised his leg and crushed his head with one foot. His action seemed to anger the evil spirits in the manor. The windows of the manor began to open and close by themselves, and all the glass was broken in the collision. The fragments flew towards the Witcher in the air. Geralt dodged some of the dangerous glass with a flash, and pinched his fingers into the Ken seal. He continued to maintain this posture, and a light yellow shield unfolded in front of him. Amid the ding-dong sound, the color of the Ken shield became lighter and lighter. Geralt saw that it was not good, and immediately stepped aside. His fingers moved slightly, and the Aiden seal appeared on the ground. The flying glass was immediately slowed down. Geralt avoided them and walked towards the main building of the manor. He approached the ominous building itself and observed it carefully. The outer wall was originally white, but now some are black, some are yellow, and some places have even turned dark red. It is not difficult to imagine what happened here. Apart from the cracked exterior wall, the glass windows were now all broken. He could not see anything through the windows. Even though the sun was covered by dark clouds, it was not yet dark and there was still light. Geralt kicked open the back door of the main building and walked in. A rotten smell immediately entered his nose. It was not just a stench, but a mixture of other terrible smells. The Witcher wished he had no nose at that moment, but he still stopped. Ken's yellow light kept spinning on him, and the dragon skin armor also gave him confidence. The Witcher continued to walk in. There was nothing much to say about the first floor. It might have been magnificent and had a constant stream of guests, but now there was nothing left. He didn't even see a rat. Logically, this kind of place would become their playground. Geralt stood at the bottom of the spiral staircase. He looked up, and his night vision ability did not allow him to see clearly what was in the darkness. The Witcher held the silver sword and planned to figure out the environment of the first floor first. He walked to the right, and a stronger stench than before entered his nose. Fortunately, he was mentally prepared and had adapted to the smell here. He just frowned a little uncomfortably. He looked around and felt that this should have been a place like a kitchen. Some things that were so rotten that they could not be seen were left on the thick wooden chopping board. Plates were broken all over the floor, and half of the door of the cabinet fell to the ground. Geralt saw several kitchen knives resting on the ceiling. His eyes stayed on the kitchen knives for a while and then returned to the ground. The Witcher moved cautiously. His footsteps were very soft, and even when he stepped on the broken plates, there was no sound. Passing through the kitchen, he saw the chandelier in the front hall lying on the ground. The stairs on both sides were the same as the back hall, but there was a painting hanging in the middle of the stairs in the front hall. It was a woman without a face, which was deliberately removed. Other than that, all her details were lifelike, including the white arms and neck. The painter's technique was very impressive. For some reason, Geralt decided to let this painting go. He continued to move forward and opened the door on the other side. There was a small reception room here. The wall paint had fallen off. There was a dried corpse lying between the overturned sofas and coffee tables, with a knife stuck in its chest. Geralt approached slowly, and the corpse suddenly sat up. Only then could he see that she was a woman. At least she was in life. She opened her mouth, showing her teeth, and screamed from her throat. Countless insects poured out of her mouth and pounced on the Witcher, but they were burned clean by the flames in midair, and their corpses made crackling sounds. The firelight illuminated half of the Witcher's face red. He had no expression on his face, and there was nothing but calmness in his cat's eyes. After the insects were burned, he removed Igni, and the corpse lay back down, as if she had never sat up before. Geralt didn't fall for her tricks. He went up and chopped off her head with a sword, and added Igni to burn her to ashes. Cough, the demon hunter coughed. He looked at his gloves. There was a ball of black blood there. It was what he just coughed out. The poison was too strong. If he didn't solve it quickly, he might be poisoned to death before killing the evil spirit. After making a decision, he no longer hesitated, turned around and left the reception room, intending to go directly to the second floor to find out. Finally finished writing. It's not past 12 o'clock yet. I'm going to eat and ask for tickets. Chapter 72 Nightmare. The Witcher walked up the stairs slowly. His boots stepped on the carpet and felt a disgusting stickiness. He didn't have time to care about this feeling. He walked up the wall little by little, until he reached the second floor. He still couldn't see the scene behind through the darkness. Everything on the second floor didn't seem to exist in this space. It was as if the darkness brought them to another world. The Witcher carefully took off the crossbow at his waist. He shot an arrow into the darkness, but heard no sound, no feedback. The arrow was as if it had never been shot. He didn't hear the sound of the arrow piercing the wall or door panel, or piercing the flesh. He hoped it was the latter, but he was disappointed. Geralt sighed deeply. He lowered his head and took a look at the leather armor on his body. It was glowing red, and it was rising and falling like a life in the darkness. The exquisite and complex patterns lit up and extinguished with Geralt's breathing. Without hesitation, he walked into the darkness. Just as he entered the darkness, his spine began to shiver, his hair stood up, and beads of sweat appeared on the Witcher's face. In just a few seconds, he felt his physical strength quickly draining away, and he could hardly hold the sword. The Witcher stood at the top of the stairs and slowly backed away, but he bumped into a solid wall behind him. He turned his head and saw that the place where the stairs were originally was now blocked by a wall decorated with exquisite red wallpaper. At the same time, the surrounding environment began to change little by little, as if to welcome him. The exquisite chandelier that had smashed the floor returned to the ceiling and lit up by itself. The candlelight was warm and swaying, illuminating the surrounding environment. In front of the Witcher appeared a long corridor that seemed to have no end. He didn't see any windows on either side. The wallpaper was the same as the wall, deep red, as thick as blood. Every few steps, there was a picture frame hanging on the wall, but there was no picture inside. Geralt stood there and took a breath. The dizzy feeling slowly passed, and his physical strength recovered again. He held the sword, feeling the heavy touch, and began to move forward very slowly, sticking to the right wall. When he took the first step, the smell in his nose was still rotten, but it became a faint fragrance when he took the second step. He also heard people talking and laughing downstairs, and even singing along with the sound of the piano. The aroma of food and the smell of the banquet entered his nose, as well as the smell of wine. The Witcher ignored him and continued to move forward. He held the sword in his right hand and always kept the posture of taking a step with his right foot first. Each step was not big, which ensured that he could exert force at any time. "Why did you come here?" a voice suddenly sounded, hoarse and unpleasant, with undisguised hatred for the living. Just listening to her talk made Geralt a little unbearable. If I had to describe it, it was like someone scratching a blackboard with fingernails. Geralt turned his head and a woman appeared in the portrait closest to him on his side. It was the woman in the painting in the middle of the stairs in the front hall. The face was also removed, but the other details were still vivid. The woman whose face was removed twisted her body, her limbs twitching, and she moved quickly in these empty frames in a terrifying posture. Geralt answered in an emotionless tone, "You locked me up here." "I didn't." The woman moved to the frame opposite him and answered slowly. "That's very strange," the Witcher said, while tensing all his muscles. "If it wasn't you who stopped me from leaving, then who would it be?" "It was him." This sentence seemed to open something. The woman screamed, and Geralt heard the sound of the blade cutting into the flesh. At the same time, the floor in front of him began to collapse inch by inch, and the chandelier on the ceiling went out and fell down again. From the hole in the ceiling fell the broken limbs and body parts, and in the blood, they combined into a woman, the woman in the portrait. She was wearing a white plain dress and a wide-brimmed hat on her head. Her arms were white, her neck was slender, and her figure was full of the charm of a mature woman, except for that face. She had no face. Where her face should have been was now a black hole. Even at this point, Geralt remained calm. He asked, "You should at least tell me who you are." Instead of being so ambiguous, the woman stood there stiffly. Geralt could see that she was trying to say something, but this time, she couldn't make a sound. She exploded. The body that had just been put together separated again. Now, this place looked bloody and terrifying, like a slaughterhouse, but the sound of the banquet still came from downstairs. Lena Bordeaux woke up from a nightmare. She dreamed of her home again. Her former home, Bordeaux Manor. The girl sat on the bed, rubbing her cheek gently, and the moonlight outside the window shone in and hit the floor. Lena felt a chill in her heart. She thought she had escaped, but now it seems that she might not have. In the dream just now, she returned to Bordeaux Manor again. She had dreamed of it more than once in the past year, but it had never been as real and credible as this time. It was as if she had really gone back. In her dream, the manor was no longer in its dilapidated state, but the way it used to be. It was beautiful and grand, and every detail was exactly the same as she remembered. She stood at the door of the manor, and the cold wind blew over her body in pajamas, making the girl shiver. Although she was very far away from the main building, she heard laughter in the banquet hall. She heard the cheerful laughter of her father, mother, and her brothers and sisters, as well as her favorite song, "The Poet and His Flowers." The person who sang this song performed it in a different style, cheerful and affectionate, and Lena was almost addicted to it. She smelled the smell in the banquet hall again, and a voice seemed to whisper in her ear, "Why don't you come back and take a look, Lena? This is your home, isn't it? Number, we miss you, Lena. Number, don't you miss us?" She wanted to scream, but she couldn't make a sound anyway. Death was gently caressing her cheek. Lena Bordeaux stood in front of the manor with her mouth wide open. She saw her parents and brothers and sisters holding hands and forming a circle. This circle was harmonious and perfect, but there was a space left, as if reminding, "You are the only one missing." Each of them had a smile on their face, warm and kind. They turned their heads and gently called to Lena, "Come and stay with us, Lena. This is your home." She recalled the nightmare scene, lay down again, pinched the quilt, and closed her eyes. She trembled and waited for the dawn, but it was late. Chapter 73. The desire to kill is rising. The explosion was a warning. Geralt thought so, but he didn't know who it was warning. Perhaps it was warning the undead here, those undead who still had their own consciousness, such as the woman. She wanted to remind him of something, but was blown to pieces by him. This matter began to become more and more strange, and Geralt had to admit that he had begun to regret it. He just wanted to take an ordinary job, but this place was as weird as a water ghost playing an accordion. The Witcher looked back, and there was still a wall behind him. He had no choice but to move forward. Going around the chandelier, the Witcher continued to move forward. He didn't know how long he had been here. Here, time seemed to have lost its meaning. The scenery on both sides did not change. It was always dark red wallpaper. There was a picture frame hanging every few meters, and the chandelier on the ceiling was also hanging intact. Geralt looked back, and the broken lamp now looked as small as a sparrow. As he walked, the sound of the banquet became clearer and clearer. He could even hear people talking to each other and a cheerful song. Only this time, the sound was not coming from downstairs, but from the front. He walked to the end of the endless corridor, and in front of Geralt was a dark red wooden door, without any carvings. Very ordinary, so ordinary that it shouldn't even appear in such a manner. Geralt didn't hesitate. He pushed the door open and walked in. What came into view was an empty banquet hall, with no one in it. But the food on the table was still steaming, and each wine glass was full, with the dark red wine swaying in it. The Witcher's heavy footsteps echoed in the empty banquet hall, and he didn't hear any sound after he opened the door. "Welcome, welcome," a man's voice rang out of thin air, and he appeared on the high platform of the banquet hall, wearing an elegant dark blue robe. Although it could no longer cover his belly, the man smiled warmly and said, "Please welcome our guests." As soon as he finished speaking, the originally empty banquet hall was filled with guests. They sat at the table. It was impossible to tell whether they were men or women. They all wore black robes and half-covered masks on their faces, revealing only their eyes. Greed and malice were not concealed in them. They began to applaud, monotonously and repetitively, making people upset. The man closest to him stood up and handed him a glass of red wine. The lips under the mask curled up a smile, revealing his yellow crooked teeth. The bright red tongue twisted in it and made a malicious voice. "Drink it. Join us." The Witcher looked at him as if he was an idiot. He was covered in blood, all of which were traces left by the explosion of the woman before. But it did not cover the flickering red light of the leather armor. Geralt slapped the red wine to the ground with a slap. The scarlet liquid, which was not sure whether it was wine, stained the black carpet red. The smile on the man's face froze, and it stayed there forever. Geralt thrust the silver sword into his throat, twisting it hard, and splashing black blood all over the faces of the guests at the table behind the man. The demon hunter took a deep breath and showed a cruel smile on his face. "You should have killed me from the beginning," someone roared, and the men and women in black rushed towards him. Thanks to the mutation, Geralt's excellent dynamic vision allowed him to see every detail of their faces. They were different, but all equally ugly. Geralt drew out the blade, and a force surged into his heart with his movements, turning into the purest desire to use violence. He swung the sword horizontally, and the exaggerated force made the silver sword cut off the 5 people closest to him in an instant, and their bodies were cut in half in the air. Black blood splattered all over the Witcher. He was surprised to find that his fatigue had completely disappeared, and he even felt better than ever before. He looked down at the leather armor. The pattern no longer flickered, and the blazing red light illuminated his face. The Witcher smiled and shook his head, whispering softly in their roars, "You really gave me a treasure." The killing began. It was not a sharing of food as they had imagined, but a one-sided slaughter. The mental attack that had always been invincible was useless to the Witcher. The strange leather armor on his body blocked all the effects. It was like a thick wall, blocking all their hands that tried to reach into the Witcher's head. He whispered in the darkness, "No, it shouldn't be like this." But that's what happened. Geralt swung the blade and created death. It was not difficult for him to send these things that might have died once to die again. The leather armor gave him an incredible boost. After being soaked in the black blood of those people, It seemed to come alive. The Witcher could even hear the roar of a dragon in a trance while swinging the sword. With a smile on his face that he didn't even realize, he chopped off the head of the woman closest to him with one sword. While her head was still flying freely in the air, Geralt had already reached the other side with unimaginable agility, like a hurricane, sweeping the entire banquet hall. Wherever he went, there was only blood and death. No one could stop his swing. Their special abilities were useless to this Witcher, and their flesh was too fragile to withstand the attack of the silver sword. Neither side realized that the outcome had been doomed since the moment Geralt entered the banquet hall. The Witcher drew out the blade, and the silver sword was covered with black blood. The man fell to the ground softly, like a pool of boneless mud. Geralt didn't even look at him. He crushed his head with one foot and walked straight to the man in blue on the high platform. He didn't care about the truth of the matter now. He just wanted to have another fight after having just killed someone. The man in blue didn't mean to run away. He just stood there, watching his companions die or get injured. The warm smile on his face never changed. Geralt walked forward. He was about to swing the silver sword to kill this guy, but he saw his eyes. The man in blue was obviously smiling, but his eyes were crying. This contradictory scene made the Witcher stop his action temporarily. He kicked the man in blue to the ground. Geralt thought this would make him stop smiling, but he didn't expect that after he fell to the ground, he still had that warm smile on his face, kind and warm, and didn't move at all. Just ignore the tears in his eyes. The Witcher sighed, and the desire to kill in his heart gradually subsided. Tomorrow, I will ask for votes. Chapter 74 The Collapse of Bordeaux Manor. The blue-clad man lay on the ground, his back raised, his eyes glowing an abnormal red, as if someone had dyed his eyeballs with paint. He made a strange sound of ho-ho from his throat, and his fingers gradually twisted, becoming thin and sharp. Yes, this is the normal development. Now you quickly turn into a monster. Kill me or I kill you. One of us must die, then this matter will be over. The Witcher thought nonchalantly. He didn't even bother to wipe the blood off the silver sword. He was sore all over now. After the adrenaline subsided, a wave of intense fatigue swept over his body, not to mention the damn poison. His internal organs felt like someone was burning with fire. He had used these potions before, but they were not as serious as this time. Geralt suspected that it was the problem of the leather armor. But this is fair. It is really unreasonable to have more powerful power without paying a price. He ignored the protests from his arm muscles and raised the sword, intending to finish him off. As a result, the blue-clad man stopped after a twitch, and he opened his mouth wide and spit out a black mist. The sickeningly warm smile on his face disappeared, and he uttered two words with difficulty: statue. After that, he exploded like that woman. Fortunately, the Witcher had anticipated this time. He pinched a continuous Ken shield to block the fragments on the shield. He looked back at the banquet hall. The lights here were still bright. As long as you ignore the blood and minced meat on the ground, you can even sit down and eat some food on the table. Yeah, statues. What's wrong with you? It won't kill you to finish your words. Geralt muttered to himself, looked at the fragments of the blue-clothed man, and apologized insincerely. Oh, sorry, I forgot that you might have died a long time ago. He walked to the door of the banquet hall and tried to push it out. As he expected, the door could not be opened again. Geralt simply sat down against the wall, his hands trembling, and wiped the sweat from his forehead. Home, sweet home. Lena Bordeaux stood in front of the dilapidated gate of her former home, Bordeaux Manor, with a bitter expression. She came alone, leaving the city at daybreak. The morning temperature made her feel a little cold in her thin clothes, but the shivering she was standing there had nothing to do with the temperature. From her perspective, Bordeaux Manor was dark, and the morning sun seemed to have nothing to do with this land. The manor stood there, as if it was a symbol of some eternal darkness. Lena shuddered, and she forced herself to look away from the bright red tower and the carouse, and walked slowly into the manor. As she walked forward, the current situation of the manor came into view. The pale white walls were mixed with dirty marks of unknown origin, and the trees and lawns were dead. The glass of the windows was also broken, and they were like the eyes of the house, staring at Lena Bordeaux. The girl looked at them, feeling more and more worried, and a kind of pessimism that was difficult to relieve strangled her heart tightly, constantly churning, and she felt sincerely afraid between sinking and floating. But she did not stop, she just moved forward, and a horse suddenly appeared on her way, as if it could not sense the strange atmosphere here. It stood leisurely on the gravel road and wagged its tail at the girl. Lena walked in and saw the saddle and blanket on the horse, as well as a sword lying on the right side of the saddle. She boldly touched the horse's head. The chestnut mare lowered her head and bumped Lena's palm with her head. "You are a docile horse, but you shouldn't come here." "No, your master shouldn't come here," Lena murmured to herself. She looked up at the top of the manor. The dark clouds dispersed, and a beam of sunlight came down, shining directly on the red brick roof, but disappeared in an instant. It was as if deliberately reminding the girl, "There is no hope here." Lena Bordeaux's face turned pale, and she felt a nausea, just like when her father took back the lantern more than a year ago. The difference was that she ran away that time, but this time, she didn't. The girl pulled out the sword on the right side of the saddle, and the heavy touch made it almost difficult for her to hold it. Fortunately, although she was a young lady, she was also good at some sports. Holding the sword, she felt a little courage in her heart. In fact, she didn't know why she came here, just like she didn't know why she saw the white-haired demon hunter in her dream. Lena Bordeaux held the steel sword of Geralt of Rivia and slowly walked into her home. Destiny. This is our destiny. Rawls touched his head. He listened to the crazy words of the preacher who was preaching loudly and sneered disdainfully. In Rawls Dundry's opinion, there is nothing in the world that they can't explain with fate. You are bankrupt. Very good. That is the fate chosen by the gods for you. Your wife miscarried. That is also fate. You were stepped on by someone for no reason when walking on the road. That is also one of your fate. In short, bad fate is on the side of the poor, and those high-ranking rich masters have the right to donate money to the church for the blessing of the gods. What is fate to them? Rawls chuckled. This is his habit. He had been laughing like this since he killed the cat of the old lady next door when he was a child. His father said that Rawls's laughing made him terrified, so he beat him up. He hit Rawls hard that time and beat him half to death. So Rawls killed him when he grew up. He felt a little sorry that he had never seen his mother, one less person to kill. He turned into the alley and came to his hut. Rawls pushed open the door and was satisfied to see a blindfolded girl tied up and lying on the ground. He chuckled twice, making the girl tremble, but she didn't make a sound, which made Rawls even more satisfied. Before, she tried to scream, until she realized that screaming would only get her a harder beating, so she stopped. She learned quickly and was very smart. Her children should be the same. Rawls's eyes shifted to the girl's belly. He laughed twice more, lit the oil lamp on the table next to him, took out a package from his arms, opened it, sprinkled some brown powder on the table, and inhaled it with his nose. Ah! Rawls exhaled like a madman. The flesh on his ugly face trembled constantly, veins bulged on his forehead, and only the whites of his eyes could be seen. He danced wildly, waving his arms, and fell to the ground full of straw, wriggling on the ground like a maggot. Suddenly, he stretched out his hand and grabbed the girl's ankle, whispering, "Master, yes, your birth is unstoppable." About 10 minutes later, he came back to his senses, his face full of joy. After turning off the oil lamp, he went out. He contacted the master again, and the master even said that he needed his help. Rawls had never been needed by anyone. He lowered his head and quickly left the city. His goal was the Bordeaux estate outside the city. Chapter 75 The Collapse of Bordeaux Manor. Geralt took off his gloves and threw them aside. He rubbed his teeth with his relatively clean little finger and saw a pool of blood. Not surprisingly, the demon hunter sighed, and the poison was slowly eroding his body. He knew that this place was probably a damn illusion, or something else. The pendant on his chest has been vibrating non-stop since he came in, but he had no way. Every time, as long as it involved this kind of damn magic illusion, he never had the upper hand and was always played around by the magician. Geralt had no doubt that if it weren't for the dragon leather armor made by the wizard for him, his fate might not be much better than the previous unlucky guy's. Now, the things in this damn manor seemed to be determined to trap him and wait until he died. Suddenly, there was a sound of footsteps outside the door. "Geralt, who had just looked weak, immediately stood up, and his fingers that had been prepared long ago activated Ken without any hesitation. He held the sword in his right hand and looked at the door vigilantly. The round handle of the door slowly turned, and a black-haired girl poked her head out. She looked panicked but tried to remain calm. Before she could speak, she screamed. Geralt lowered his head and found that the ground under his feet began to twist, like a beast with a bloody mouth, and instantly swallowed the Witcher's body from the waist down. The girl immediately wanted to come over and pull him up. The Witcher stretched out his hand to signal her to stop, and calmly watched himself sink in rapidly. Behind the girl, the door slammed shut, the broken limbs and arms on the floor of the banquet hall disappeared, and the men and women in black robes sat down again. The aroma of food and wine filled the whole room. On the high platform in front, a man in blue slowly walked out. He had a warm and gentle smile on his face, opened his arms and said, "Welcome home, Lena." Lena Bordeaux looked at him palely, closed her mouth tightly, did not make a sound, not even a panicked whimper. On the contrary, she even clenched the steel sword in her hand. "Why don't you come over and give your father a hug, Lena?" The man in blue winked playfully, and the smile on his face grew wider and wider, almost to the root of his mouth. Lena held the steel sword in her hand, and the weight of it gave her a little false courage. She didn't understand why things turned out like this, and an image circled in her mind, like crows circling around a dying person, waiting to feast on him. She thought of the lantern in her mind. The white lantern was exquisite and artistic, and it brought surprises every time it was lit. With just a little flame, it could illuminate half of the sky, and even the color of the light could change. Sometimes it was blue, sometimes green, and sometimes white. Sometimes, it would turn red, scarlet color, just like now. The man in blue put his hand into his stomach, and with a disgusting gurgling sound, he took out a white lantern and raised it up, and it shone brightly. The scarlet light filled the entire banquet hall, shining on the faces of the men and women in black robes, reflecting their expressions even more weirdly. "Come and hug me, child." Lena saw her father smiling, and he recited these words in an aria-like tone. These words were obviously very warm, but they were spoken without any warmth, just like a bad actor reciting lines from a script, which also shattered the girl's last fantasy. She clenched the steel sword in her hand, and for some reason, she suddenly had the strength to lift it. She raised the steel sword and pointed it at the thing on the stage. She was unwilling to admit that it was her father, although it might have her father's appearance and shape, even voice, and even memory. But her father was dead. The smile on the blue-clothed man's face disappeared for the first time. His eyeballs fell out of his eye sockets, fell to the ground with a slap, and turned into two worms that climbed up the ceiling. His skin began to twist and deform, like a melted wax figure, turning into a puddle of mud that covered the entire stage. In this terrifying and horrifying scene, Lena saw her mother stand up from the mud in despair. No, the mother smiled gently. She opened her hands. The white ivory bracelet on her right wrist, which she never took off, reflected the red light in her pupils. The mother whispered softly, just like before, "Come and join us, child. This is your destiny." These two words exploded in the banquet hall like thunder. Her voice was no longer gentle as before, but like the roar of a monster. Facing such a scene, Lena Bordeaux was not afraid, but calmed down. The steel sword in her hand was pointed at the thing with her mother's appearance. She said, "You told me, mother, you told me the ancestral motto of the Bordeaux family. Although you may not remember it, a Bordeaux never surrenders." She moved the blade and pointed it at the damn lantern. "With tears and hatred," she said, "you can turn into their appearance to scare me, deceive me, and even make me restless at night. But what else can you do besides that? You are just a useless lamp." She rushed over, and the men and women at the table stood up, stretched out their dry arms to try to stop the girl, and even tried to rush over to stop the girl. But it was useless. These horrible monsters seemed so useless when facing such a weak girl. Their arms broke and rotted when they were hit. Several of them even flew out with their heads hit. Seeing this scene, the woman on the high platform screamed furiously. Things became more and more wrong since the arrival of the damn demon hunter, and the body it had planned had not yet been born. Now, It actually had no other means except to use illusions. The distance of more than 10 meters was reached in no time. The girl raised the steel sword in her hand high and chopped it down with force. The blade, which was well maintained by Geralt, burst into countless sparks the moment it came into contact with the lantern. The glass in the middle of the lantern shattered, and the outer surface was cut in half by the weight of the blade and the girl's strength. The woman let out her last scream. The whole banquet hall began to shake. With a clang, the steel sword fell to the ground. Lena Bordeaux stumbled to her knees. Around her, the figures of men and women began to jump, and the thing with the appearance of her mother slowly melted. She suddenly understood in her heart that this was the end. This was the end of the Bordeaux family. She closed her eyes and let the building shake. The ceiling rustled, smoke and dust fell, and a piece of wood fell and hit her. Bang! "Get up, damn it," a hoarse voice said. Lena opened her eyes blankly and saw the demon hunter who had disappeared before standing in front of her with a sword in one hand and a pale yellow light shield in the other. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.